Public body shall give notice of the date, time, and location of its meetings, other than special, emergency, or continued meetings at least 3 working days in advance by posting such notice on its official public government website, if any, placing such notice in a prominent public location at which notices are regularly posted, and placing such notices at the office of the clerk of the public body, or in the case of a public body that has no clerk, the office of the chief administrator. Reasonable notice under the circumstances of special, emergency, or continued meetings shall be given contemporaneously with notice provided to members of the policy body conducting the meeting. Ms. Tanner, has today's school board meeting been properly certified?
Yes, Madam Chair. On June 27, 2019, notice was provided fulfilling all criteria of VA Code Chapter 37.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Tanner. I duly call this meeting to order. All right. Welcome to everyone in attendance today. It's good to see you all. Happy September. I would like to go ahead and begin with the roll call. Ms. Tanner?
Basine? Here. Campson?
Here.
Clanton?
Present.
Smith?
Here.
Martin?
Here.
Gordon? Gabriel?
Here. Before we begin our meeting today, I would like to go ahead and have us do a moment of silence in remembrance of all of the victims, the workers, and all of the individuals who participated in lives that were tragically lost with September 11th. So let's just go ahead and have a moment of silence. We have a very packed agenda today, and to stay on target with time, we'll go ahead and get started. Dr. Birdsong, lead us off with student learning and achievement.
Dr. Gabriel, thank you again for the opportunity to share unofficial data with you. As I shared with you, I believe it was in July, we will not expect official data until September the 29th. And during our October work session, we will provide to the school board a very thorough and in-depth look at our data in all areas. So thank you for your patience with that. But today we do have another update for you, and so I'm going to ask Dr. Cataldo and Karen Bailey to please come forward. They will be providing a snapshot of our SOL data and our plan of action to address areas of deficiency. Dr. Cataldo, Dr. Bailey, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Birdsong and Dr. Gabriel, and this opportunity to provide certainly a quick update as it relates to the data. I don't know if you noticed, but not very much changed. And so I'm going to just step you through quickly so that we can get to, what we're going to do about where we are today. Certainly just a quick snapshot. We had over, 60,000 tests that we administered, and we provided it on all different types of platforms and also addressed any students that had a different need. Certainly, this particular slide, just real quickly, as you look at the ESSA, what's included in the ESSA calculation, it is quite different than the combined growth and the SOA. So as we look at the data, that's why you see a big difference, and this is why. Our leveling system with the new accreditation methodology, this is just for the achievement gap areas. And so we have the level 1, 2, and 3 associated with green, yellow, and red. This is our performance. Not much has changed there other than the 70% for the ESSA pass rate for math. Not much change there. Not much change there. Certainly we provided this so you could see the gap difference by subgroups The state also calls them achievement gaps or gap groups. This particular chart, I will just spend just a little bit of time explaining this to you. During the retreat, it was mentioned that the board would like to see some of our data as it relates to cohort groups. This is just a quick snapshot of the data looking at a quasi-cohort, meaning that we have kids that will come in and out during the year and in between grade levels. So you can see that the progression from grade 3 to grade 4 the next year, the grade 5 the next year, and reading looks pretty good. But there's a difference between grade 5 and grade 6. And part of that is the test becomes a little bit more rigorous at the middle school level. They're having to analyze data a little bit more, as well as the passages are a little bit longer. Okay, and let me just take you to this particular chart with our math results. Same concept, looking at grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and then to grade 6. We have separated grade 7 and 8 from looking at the cohort because we provide multiple opportunities for our students at various levels to take either the pre-algebra test at grade 6 or grade 7, also to take the Algebra 1 test at grade 7 or grade 8, and geometry. So we did not extend the cohort analysis beyond the 6th grade level, and that's because of that. So we do see that we also have that difference from grade 5 to grade 6. A lot of things, just to sum it up quickly for you, it could be students struggling with ratios and proportions, also multiplications that, usually it gets more advanced as you get into the middle school level.
Okay. Dr. Birdsong, Ms. Campson has a question. Would this be an appropriate time to stop for questions, or are there any other slides that you want to get through before we get to the next segment of the presentation?
Well, if she could just get through the content areas and before we do the district overview, that would be fine, if you would allow that.
Okay. And actually, we have our science and our history results. And the state of Virginia is reducing the number of tests that are administered at the high school level. And so while they can satisfy their graduation requirements by taking really one SOL test in science and one in history, students can still take the other types of courses and get credit for it. They just don't have to take the SOL test. So this was the first year we saw a huge reduction in the number of students participating in those associated tests. And here, the summary or district highlights. It has not changed from when we shared this with you during the summer. And then we also have listed most of our schools that are meeting, exceeding the 90% per the content area. Now we're at the point.
Okay.
For questions?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Campson, I know I saw your hand up.
Page one that shows the quasi-cohorts.
For
reading.
For reading.
I think it would be maybe
Page
page
13,
8.
maybe.
For there.
All the other pages have a page number on it.
Page 8, I believe.
Page 8.
Okay, so as we're going down and we're moving to year 18 and 19, and you have two scores, am I assuming that the first score is the ESSA score or the recovery score adjusted?
Right, the first score is the ESSA score, and in parentheses is the combined rate.
Which is the gross score?
Yes.
All right, so if we look there, what we're seeing is that our reading scores this year, that's great, if we look across, are pretty much the lowest scores we've had since 2014. All right.
Yes,
Just
really
checking now.
2015 since the 62, since we were 63 this year, so.
So we've had a big drop in our reading. Are we going to be hearing about the adjustments that are being made when
Yeah,
we
that's
get
my
into
part.
the second part, a little bit more than we see in the slides, a little more detail than that.
Yes.
Because it looks like we've been in a steady decline for the last 3 years.
Yes.
Hampson, we acknowledge that, and we're going to be sharing strategies that
Okay,
we'll be focused on this year to address some of those areas.
thank you very much.
Mr. Jordan?
Clarify that for me, so I'm following the cohort data.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see the grade 8 data going across,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't quite following the piece. But at the grade 8 level, I do see the fluctuation going across. At the cohort level, I see the drop from grade 7 to grade 8.
Yes, my interpretation of Ms. Campson's comment is that the 63 is the ESSA pass rate, and in parentheses is the 72, which is the Grove pass rate. And so she's also looking across for grade level 8, from the performance 2014, 54%, 15, 62%, the next year, 63%. And I believe her comment was that our progress, we haven't seen progress as we may have expected in grade 8 across the years.
Could I clarify a little bit? I was actually looking across, I'm sorry, just a
Well,
response
she'll
to
clarify.
that clarification, because I'm sorry if I was not clear. I was actually looking at the combined reading scores for the district
Okay.
and noting that going across, starting in 2016, and then, in 2017, it just goes down, down, down. And then if I look at cohorts, the same thing. If I look at grade 3 cohort at 56, 65, 74, 67, the same group of kids, and then noticing the big drop this past year. So that's what I was looking
Okay.
both ways, Mr. Jordan. So I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I wanted to look at the district level, and then I was looking at the 2014 group of kids as they went down as the quasi-cohort. When you're going across, of course, you're not looking at cohorts.
Right.
But I was just feeling very concerned, because this was a concern I had all last year, and I see that we've dropped even more, as Dr. Birdsong acknowledged. Thank you. Yeah, I noticed that too.
Something happened at 17 that
Wouldn't it be good to know what that spike was so we could spike it again?
created.
Right.
Which is probably what we're going to find out.
Ms. Basine?
I mean, if there are any tests of looking for any significant differences, because there are a variety of factors related to the student population that may have changed over time, that would be influencing some of these differences, especially at, between 5th and 6th grade, where we sometimes may get students based on programs and things like that, or that's where we may see a decline in enrollment. So I'd like to know some of those.
Okay, and we,
Based on percentages, right,
Right.
not number.
right, and so we did look at just a slight deviation, looking at our 3-8 and K-8 schools to see if they had the same type of drop between elementary and middle, and they didn't quite have that, so it warrants a further review.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
interesting.
I wonder if we, make sure this is on here, if we look back at 2017, and we also look at resource allocation, particular in bodies, individual staff supporting in that area, if there was a shift within our allocation of people after 17 going into 18.
Specialists.
Reading specialists?
Yeah.
When we got the reading specialist.
I think part of that needs to be, when we look at the school-by-school data, because this is still rolled-up data, so
It's a
trying
lot.
to garner too much from
Having the data allows us to draw these questions, and then certainly you all, I know that you are looking at the data to draw upon conclusions to figure out, how can we either build upon successes or course correct items that need adjustments. So we can go ahead and, one more question? Okay.
Or a quick remark. I think that you'll find that changes like this have less to do with the children, because our demographics may alter a little bit in a school here and a school there, but overall, it isn't what the children are doing. The children are doing what we're asking them to do, and that's not the first place to start to look for what's happening. What we need to look at is what we're doing as the adults in the building that may have changed it. Maybe there's been more impact because of a change in leadership in a building or something, but it's never due to what's happening with the children. There'd have to be a massive change in a school to do this. It's never look at the children for the cause of a drop.
Clear, we are not blaming children for any of this.
Thank you.
To be clear.
Thank you.
No, not at all. Okay. Oh, okay, Ms. Basine?
Since we're clarifying things, I just want to be sure that that was an example when you do statistical analyses to look for whether something's significant. You look at various factors. Student population is not the child, but changes in demographics and enrollment at a particular school, those are all known factors to impact performance. But in addition to that, changes in whether we've had, changes in staffing, changes in other school-based factors that we can look at. That's what I'm asking for, a more holistic, comprehensive analysis so that we can really pinpoint what it is we need to do. So I just want to clarify that. So thank you for that.
All right.
And to Mr. Jordan's point, it would be of value to look at each school's individual data as
Sure.
we're looking at division level.
And I know that is the plan, as we get the official data.
I was just going to ask, as part of that same discussion, I guess, we get the future report. I know you are describing this as quasi-cohort. So just want to get some clarity as we move forward. Cohort. I mean, are they the same children or not? And even on the school-by-school basis, when we talk about or discuss the turnover in a school. So students that may have taken a test at one school, because we have so much transition, could be taking a test at another year at a different school. And then we have military transition, so students we may have tested in one year may not be the same students we are testing in the subsequent year. So being able to see that or have a better understanding of that would be appreciated.
So you're asking for a true cohort. Yes, got that.
All right, we're going to go ahead and keep things moving. Thanks, Dr. Birdsong. Next section.
So for the next section, we've identified certainly with our reading scores that to be an area of growth for us this year. And so we have been very intentional about looking at the data and devising a plan of action to address some of these areas. And so Dr. Cataldo will present that information at this time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Gabriel, Dr. Birdsong, members of the board, and thank you, Dr. Bailey, for the beginning part. As you can see from the data review that Dr. Bailey has shown, that you've seen before, we have a definite area of improvement need, which would be in reading proficiency. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is what we are doing about that, and what we're doing differently about that, because each year we kind of work towards eliminating the weaknesses and really building up the strengths, looking for bright spots and trying to expand those and try to have those multiply. So the very first thing, if you look up there, we're talking about a literacy SMARTY goal. So we've kind of developed a SMARTY goal that many of our schools, through focus schools, have gone through and developed as well. And we have done it within our departments and within CAB as well. So the SMARTY goal is something for the whole division. So just to kind of go over that, a SMARTY goal is something that's specific. It's a measurable goal. It's attainable. It's also relevant, timely, and the E part is for everyone. So that's kind of what our goal is. And so if you look by June 2020, 75% of our schools will show growth in reading proficiency, and this is very specific here, as measured by SOL data, PALS, and also STAR data. So we're going to be looking at multiple areas, triangulation, multiple points of data that we can look at how our students are performing. Now, a lot of this SOL, well, the DBAs as well is included in that. And that gives us kind of a snapshot where we are each quarter, and then we make adjustments to our plan as we move forward. All schools, 100%, will show an increase in the achievement of students with disabilities as measured by the reading SOL. And then all schools will show an increase in the achievement of Black students as measured by the reading SOL as well. So those are some areas that we're really focusing on with our SMARTY goals. These SMARTY goals come directly from the data that we have just gone over. Each year, as you develop SMARTY goals, you change that as things change within the division. Great, thank you. Next slide. So the first thing we're going to really do is the implementation of the 2019-20 Norfolk Public Schools literacy plan. So we have the plan. The plan is kind of the how. It's going to be very specific. It's going to be very measurable. We're going to be aligning the NPS literacy model. If you remember that model, sent that out, I think, about a year. Well, last year we had our full implementation. So the year before, it was about 93 pages. It's a lot of information. It's all scientific-based, research-based strategies for improving reading. So we don't expect our teachers to look through that book, look through 93 pages and kind of come up what they're doing. So what we do is each year we look at all the data, we look at where our weaknesses are, where our strengths are, and we develop a plan. So that literacy plan is what we're going to be following. I'm going to talk a little bit about that literacy plan today, how that looks different based on today's data as opposed to last year or in 2 years from now. So first of all, of course we want to align the NPS literacy model, which is best practice in literacy instruction. We want to make sure that our goals are measurable, as I just mentioned with the SMARTY. And then also we have a timeline. So this literacy plan is about a 7-page document, and it goes through each month what we are going to do in curriculum instruction, in English, the English department, what we're going to do to support our schools and support them in this area of literacy. But we know it's not just one issue in English. It's something that we have to work on collectively in curriculum in general. We're going to look at power strategies, and then we're also going to develop action steps to make sure we get us there. We are going to look really to build expertise. So build expertise, training topics, to include resources and support training. That expertise will be building in our teachers through focused training, coaching. We're also going to look to change practice. See what's actually happening in the schools. Our English department under Gwen Collins has been going through, and they've actually gone in and will be going into every single school. The goal is really to get into every classroom and see what's going on in those classrooms. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But changing practice is very important, and we're going to be doing that with very focused coaching, and I'll talk more specifics. Monitoring of training and implementation. I think a key part is that you have to monitor the training that you do. You have to monitor what you're doing. And so what the plan is that during principals meetings, we work with our principals. Then what we do is we go into schools and we look to see how the professional development that we've implemented in several meetings or different areas of training is how it's being implemented in the classroom. So we're going to be looking at observational data as well. So not just looking at scores, but looking at what actually is happening in the classrooms. So that's the first part, is the implementation of that literacy plan. We're going to look to strategically align our resources, instructional resource teachers, district content specialists working together with special education, staff training, and then also focus school support with our literacy plan. So we're going to be using focus schools, the resources we have with them, and they're going to be working with our departments to really work on that literacy and help us when we get into the classrooms. What are we seeing, the coaching piece that we need to do. And then also we're really focusing a lot this year too on bringing the Department of Learning Support, special education, working with them in all areas in all avenues. And I think that's, if you look at, some of the scores with our students with disabilities, it's an area we really need to work on. If we could increase that by 10%, we're accredited all the way through. And so it's a definite possibility, and I think it's going to require a lot of training and working with teachers in the collaborative model. What does that collaborative model look like? How can we improve on that model? So we'll also be focusing and conducting a needs assessment in all of our level 2 and level 3 schools as determined by the state, and that's about 19 schools. So we're going to be going through 19 schools, meeting with schools. We're going to review data, discuss instructional focus. We're going to look at the resources they have within their buildings, because some schools have more resources than others, and how can we align those resources more effectively. We're going to be looking at the master schedule. When are you having your English classes? ALA, is it, or ELA, is it in the morning, is it the afternoon? We know in the afternoon, students are not quite as focused sometimes, so, how does it look in the master schedule? We're looking at our new teachers. We have, 77 brand new to teaching teachers is what we have this past year. So these teachers need some support, so we're really looking at our support model. So again, as I mentioned, it's not just an issue in the English department, but we're bringing professional development in place and all other departments, special education, to really focus on that. So we're noticing that the professional development piece with our new teachers, our coaching that we're doing for them, is really going to be a big, it's going to be a dramatic place to provide our resources. And we believe that so far we've seen with the teachers, they're very receptive to that. And of course, when we see them in the schools, they're like, what kind of support can we get? And we have a whole list of things. We do a book support. We also provide monthly training sessions. We do Google Classroom as well, and really just try to provide that support to them. So that needs assessment, we're going to develop a plan for support for each school. So each school is going to have a different plan. It's based on what their needs are in that particular school. So that's another piece. Conducting quarterly data reviews to develop a plan of support for our conditionally accredited schools. And that, in that process, we're going to be working with ARA, with Dr. Bailey's department. We're looking at pulling STAR data, again, DBA data, and looking at our subgroups, tracking proficiency, and looking at not only grade level data by school, but school data as a whole as compared to the SOL data. So really trying to get in to the specifics of where we're noticing our weaknesses and how we can provide some additional support. Another thing too is after we start looking at that STAR data and DBA data, we realize we're going to have to make adjustments to our 7-page literacy plan for this year, because each year it changes as you go through the quarters and as you go through all the testing to see where, again, we have weaknesses or strengths. We're also going to conduct a quarterly subgroup data analysis for all schools. And another piece on our plan of action to improve reading proficiency is to collaborate with the Department of Learning Support to build reading proficiency in students with disabilities. So that's really going to be a key focus. We're going to build capacity by focusing on the stages of the literacy development and ensuring that our teachers that are working with students with disabilities know exactly what that literacy development is. Now, if they are a special education teacher, they probably have not had some specific literacy development training, and so that we're going to make sure that they have the same level of support as we provide our reading specialists and some of that same level of instruction. Addressing what students need and where and how they move. We're looking too at professional development focus. A big focus this past year was the UVA Teachers of Struggling Readers Academy. We had 50 teachers in the spring, this past spring. We're going to have 120 teachers, and many of them are special education teachers. So what we really, what we looked at is when we did the training this past year, just to see how our special education teachers would receive this, their eyes were open. They were excited about coming in. It's several days of training. It's by UVA. They came up, since we have so many, they come out to us and do the training. But that UVA Strugglers Reading Academy, I definitely encourage you to get a chance if when we have some of those trainings to come out and see what they're doing. But the special education teachers are learning exactly, what a lot of reading specialists learn. And they're learning how to work with students that are not able to read, maybe in 3rd and 4th grade. What happens a lot of times, too, is we think that 3rd and 4th grade teacher, do they need to teach how to read? Usually not. But in our students that are struggling, those students can't read. And the teachers don't have the experience or many times the training to be able to work with a 3rd or 4th or 5th grader that can't read. So what happens is that 3rd or 4th or 5th grader continues not being able to read because no one is really addressing their specific needs. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that our teachers are aware of those skills, other than the reading specialist, and other support personnel that we have in the school. We also have letters training, too. We're going to be doing letters training this year. Now, letters, LTRS, is out of Voyager Sopris. It is actually a program that BDOE has purchased, and they are actively going through and training a couple people per school division, and really want to bring this about. We've actually gone through and said we don't want just a couple teachers. We want as many teachers as we can have trained. And we actually met, Ms. Collins and I met with the representative and the regional director of Sopris, and we talked about how we can incorporate and get more teachers involved in this training. So this training is very specific. It's in building capacity, focusing on systematic phonics. It's a real phonics-based instruction to bring foundational literacy skills. So we're trying to really work in those areas where we see those deficiencies. And this, again, this is just the collaboration with learning support. So that's just one small part of our whole plan. We're going to work to include special education teachers in training, in planning, going through needs assessments, and also set up weekly meetings with SPED teachers. And they're also being incorporated in our weekly 4 core meetings. So we have like a 4 core meeting every week. We're going to be incorporating, we have special education coming and professional development, because we know those are some key things that's going to help us get to where we need to get to. It really comes down to, as Ms. Campson said, it's not about the students, it's about the teachers and what they're doing in the classroom. And when we look at our level, it's how we're supporting those teachers and how we're providing them what they need to be able to do their best job. I mean, that's what our role is here. Collaborate with the Department of Learning Support to increase the capacity of special education teachers in general with a lot of these things I just mentioned. And to better understand, again, as I mentioned, the stages of reading development. We're going to provide literacy coaching and support to the Department of Curriculum Instruction, again, based on student level data school level data. So we are going to look at not a one-size-fits-all for all of our schools. We're going to look specifically, what does this one school need? Where were their needs last year? How are they this year? How many long-term subs are in that school? How many brand-new first-year teachers are in that school? They're going to get a different level of support than another school that had very little turnover, and a school that maybe did not do as well proficiency-wise, but did not have the same level of turnover or change as other schools. So we're looking at it as school by school. So it's very intensive work, but it's very specific, and I think that's a key part for it. Another part of our plan of action is provide executive coaching and differentiated support through focus schools. I had mentioned before, focus schools has helped with our school division in really bringing about a greater focus on instruction in our schools. And so we're taking that the next step farther and having them work with our English department and with special education too. Provide professional development to building principals on a monthly basis. So every month when we have our principal meetings, we will have a representative, Ms. Collins from English. She will be there to work with the principals, talk about strategies, talk about look-fors, things they should be seeing in the classroom when they're going to the classrooms. Because we know a lot of our principals, they may not be English specialists or in different areas. I was a science teacher, so if you asked me to look into an English classroom when I was a principal, I would need to know exactly what I'm looking for. And so we want to make sure to provide our principals with that level of support. So we want to provide them that support along with learning support would be doing that too, in practice of reading instruction, and also on the collaborative teaching model. That's kind of a low-hanging fruit area, I always say, because with collaborative teaching, that's where you have another teacher in your classroom. Now, ideally, how should that work? You should be able to walk in the class and not even know who's the special education teacher and who's the regular ed teacher. You should not even know the difference, and they should both be working together, working with all students, not just these are my students and those are your students. So that's, we really want to develop that, that training model and ensure that our special education teachers working with regular ed teachers are doing these same things that we know are beneficial. When I was a teacher, I had a special education collaborative teacher with me, and my first year I just had her running copies and grading papers in the back. I didn't get the training. This particular training that we're doing and we're looking at working with Dr. Janet St. Mitchell's department is really focusing on that and getting our collaborative teachers to really have a very strong focus on what they're doing. Increase the amount of scheduled time that students will be reading during the instructional day too. So, you know, we've heard before and talked about 14.2. Well, 14.2 is great for one class, but we also need 14.2 in another class. We need to increase the amount of time that our students are reading, not just 14 minutes in the whole entire day, but they really should be reading in multiple subjects, multiple areas. Gwen Collins is going through, her department and her team, they're going through every single elementary school, and they are taking inventory of reading libraries. And if that classroom does not have a reading library, if you can't walk in that classroom and just see a whole side full of books, then we're working with our other departments to get those books to them. So that's really been a big focus, because we know we need books for our students to read. They need to be high interest books. They need to be books that stimulate that creativity, especially for our young boys that, you know, sometimes reading isn't always cool, but if you have some really neat topics. I saw a couple that had snakes and spiders all over. I mean, as a kid, I would have loved that to read. So it's really something
Books.
that we want to.
Graphic comics, whatever they'll read.
So yeah, it's really something that we want to get that into our classroom. So if we look on our continued plan, again, modeling, co-teaching, we're doing a lot of cross-training of our support staff. We're doing cross-training with our special education teachers. We're doing cross-training with the ITRTs as well too, because they're all teachers. They were teachers before. Providing formative feedback to our teachers. We talked about that before, the bug in the ear, you know, where they can hear and get that immediate feedback. Supporting literacy via focus schools. And then also monitoring coaching logs. So our reading specialists do provide logs. They provide logs that are uploaded. We monitor those, and we look for what they're doing in the schools to really see. And so we're going to have a more focused interest in that area. Then also ensuring curriculum is implemented with fidelity, aligning the written, taught, tested curriculum in accordance with the new 2017 standards. So here we are with the new year. It's 2017. It's always a couple years behind because they get it, they implement it. We did the crosswalk last year, and this year we're going through that standards. Implement thematic units, which I know I've mentioned before, read and write across the content areas, and analyze data to include classroom observation data. So those are really a lot of things we're doing. Kind of wrapping up, literacy best practice, increase authentic reading experiences, I had mentioned. Build strong foundation of phonological awareness and phonics in our beginning readers with the UVA Struggling Readers Academy and Letters program. Develop strategies, critical, independent readers, drawing conclusions, making inferences, summarizing and determining importance. Building reading proficiency of students with reading disabilities, and also providing students access to diverse, authentic, and culturally relevant books I had mentioned before. So those are the kind of steps we're really looking to do. We've also looked, and there's one more there, we've looked at the lesson plan template, and based on our academic review this past year with the Virginia Department of Education, they provided some suggestions for us on what we could do to improve our lesson plans, because when we went through and kind of graded that piece, our teachers did not do very well in the lesson plan area. And so what we determined in curriculum instruction that we can help our teachers do better by actually having some clearly stated things on those lesson plans. So we've sent those out to our teachers. We've replaced the essential questions and big idea with essential skills. We have added a warm-up component separate from the anticipatory set. We provided clarification regarding the purpose of the anticipatory set as defined by VDOE. Provided more descriptors for direct instruction and guided practice. And we've really separated the conclusion of the lesson plan into 2 separate segments, which are, again, some areas we did not get the kind of the points when we went through all of our lesson plans. So we're trying to make it easier for the teacher, provide them with the support that they need, provide them the tools, the guidance, and really be available to any of the needs they may have to really get us to our level of proficiency in reading that we need to be in.
Questions about the action plan before we move on?
Okay, all right, Ms. Basine, Ms. Campson, and then I'm going to let everybody, for the sake of time, we're going to have one pass at the questions for right now. So Ms. Basine, go ahead.
You mean one question, or, because I have a couple of questions.
Start with your most important, if you don't mind.
So, you talked a lot about training of special education teachers and some of the cross-training between different support teachers. But what about the general education teachers in terms of helping to, working with their special education students with IEPs? And also, in relation to that, I'd like to know more about, has the division thought about looking at the student-to-teacher ratio, and if that was found to also impact some of the performance of our students with disabilities?
I'm not sure about the student-to-teacher ratio, if we've looked at that part specifically. But, so your previous question in regards to special education and the regular ed teacher, so how are we supporting the regular ed teacher? So the regular ed teacher, they're getting the UVA Struggling Readers Academy as well. So
Okay, I
it's
didn't get
not
that
just
part.
special
Okay.
education teachers. We have 120. When we did the first 50, I think it was the first 50 were only special education. This next 120 are special education and regular ed teachers. Yeah, that's a very important component. We need to make sure that we're providing the same level of support to our regular ed teachers. Now, many of them had that training initially, being English teachers and going through school, but we really need to be very specific with what we're doing. And then the other piece is that collaborative model. That collaborative model is really not just for the special education teacher, it's how the special education teacher and the regular ed teacher work together. Ideally, that training is done with both of them together. So they're both getting the same training and they know what they can do together and how they together can be stronger than just the two individually.
That, Mrs. Basine, Mrs. Collins is required to meet with our department chairs and reading specialists on a monthly basis to provide training, and they in turn go back to their buildings to share those best practices with classroom teachers. So they're getting a triple dose of training.
And along those notes, so what have you gathered any policy changes or any resource changes? And I'm talking specifically, we've had advocacy around instituting an inclusion policy, as well as, and I've raised the issue for the last couple of years about having an inclusion specialist to really look at it. And I asked that question because, we see, not just we, I think in the state and around the country, you see a high turnover of our inclusion teachers. And so what can we do to better support in that area, whether through policy and through resource allocation? So those are some food for thought for maybe
Okay.
next time.
Thank you.
That's always a good question to bring to the board, because that's what we do. So, Ms. Campson.
This sounds really good. I'm assuming that when we look at the 1920 literacy plan, that's because the last 4 years we've been under the NPS literacy plan. That's what I was told all last year. So is this a new plan, or is this the same plan we've been using for 4 years?
Okay, that's a great question. So actually, last year was the first year we did the literacy model, complete literacy model. That was, I think, last year was the first year. So this was a 93-page.
3 years, I guess, because we were told that 3 years to implement it, and last year it was finally implemented.
Oh, yes, the whole process. The process took from interviewing teachers, all of our stakeholders, having CERN come out, do a full audit of our school division. That was like a 2-year process.
So
And then
this
last
year's
year-
plan is going to be somewhat different from last year's when we fell off the cliff?
It is a completely different plan based upon the data from last school
Yeah,
year.
this
It's a
plan-
new plan.
Thank you, thank you.
plan I went over
Very
today
specific.
is very
So-
specific.
so-
And it will be changing as we get DBA data, as we get STAR data every quarter. It's not just a static plan that's going to stay there. It's going to be a working model.
It's not the model, it's an actual action plan.
Seven-page
So
plan.
if we imagine that I'm a third grade teacher, pretty easy to do since I was a third grade teacher. And I picked that because it's, of course, such a transitional grade where we move from learning to read to reading to learn, but you can't read to learn unless you're reading on grade level in third grade. So in my last 2 years, my children have been scoring maybe 55, 60% of my students are scoring on grade level as measured by the SOL test when they're assessed. So I'm sitting in my classroom this year, and I'm in week 2 now. What have I received as hard non-negotiables that I need to be doing during my reading instruction? In other words, when the principal walks into my classroom, the teacher who only had a 55, 60% pass rate for the last 2 years, and who's working very hard. Doesn't mean they're not working hard. They're working real hard. That's our job, to give them the tools and the leadership to have success. So I'm sitting there, and I worked really hard the first year, and I did some different things the second year, and my scores are the same, and I'm in tears when I'm looking at my scores because so what do we have in this? Because this is all district level, and maybe that's all we're hearing. But what do I need to know that they're going to be looking for in my room out of all those research-based strategies that we all have in the 93 pages? What are they looking for? They're going to come in my room and they're going to look for justification of answers all through the day. So the kids are hitting that metacognitive kick in when we ask those kind of questions. Are they looking for Marzano's #1 strategy? And we all know what that is, similarities and differences. What are they looking for in my room that they're training me to implement that we know has had proven success? As a third grade teacher, do I have that information? As a school principal, do I know what I need? And I know I heard you say look for, so I know it's in your mind.
Right.
Yes.
But as a principal, because I know when we were doing those math calendars, and I'm a reading specialist, I had look fors. When I walked in and when we had those daily calendars, whatever they're called, for math, I had a list. I knew what I was looking for when I walked in that room, and that teacher knew what she should have in place because that was the math department's decree that was a big bang for your buck strategy.
So, Ms. Campson, question?
That's my question.
Okay.
Where
The question,
I'm
okay,
not
just want-
seeing that. Is that?
Well, that was in the part when I had described and talked about how we going to be going into all of our 19 schools, doing a real assessment dive. So that means that assessment piece we're going to be going into each of those schools, and in fact,
What
what
if
are all
you
the
don't get to
different
my
areas?
school till January?
Well, so to be
No,
a
this
little more.
is all going to be done, this is all going to be done the next, I think, month and a half. I mean, so
Okay.
we're going to have this done very
That's
quickly.
right.
We're having not just our resources within our department, but we're also looking at resources with focused schools, too. But we really want to do that needs assessment, and I think that's what we need. That will tell us, again, we're not doing a blanket approach for everybody. We are going to go into the schools, work with principals, work with our specialists, look at last year's scores, look at if our teachers were there from the year before, what were their scores, what did they need assistance on. So it is going to be an individual school plan for each of our 19 schools that are all listed as level 2 and level 3 schools as indicated by the state. So we really feel that plan will let us know, in your example, what you would need in the classroom. Part of that plan will be working with the principals so then they can really have a look for on what am I supposed to be looking for?
Right,
I
exactly.
was not an English teacher, and I don't know what to look for. So part of that whole piece, and it's not, in the past, we had Ms. Collins and her team, like, they would go in, they would observe classrooms, they would write a report to the principal and say what they saw, then they would leave and go to another school. It's going to be completely different. Now what they're doing is they're going to the school with the reading specialist, with the department chair, with an administrator, and they're going to walk through together and say, this is what I'm seeing. When I leave your school today and I go to some other school tomorrow, I need you to carry on what we just talked about and what the look-fors are.
And
That's
we'll
a
be
big
back,
shift.
so we're not doing
Yes,
drive-by
exactly.
walkthroughs.
And that's a big shift. We're actually spending full days in schools in each
And are we
school.
then training our principals to do
And that's what I
narrow
was
limbs?
trying to
Yeah.
mention.
Narrow
Yeah.
And
limbs?
that Gwen will be in front of principals every month,
Every
along with Janice James Mitchell. Okay?
Yeah, every month.
And so they will develop those look-fors, and while they may be differentiated based upon the school's
Absol- oh,
needs,
yeah,
there will be some
absolutely.
general look-fors that every
Everyone
English
should
and reading
District-wide
classroom.
non-negotiables. I
Right.
think it's time to bring the non-negotiables back for some things. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Ms.
Very
Smith.
thorough.
Good questions.
I would like,
Yep.
Dr. Bergson, that you guys reconsider the goals, because we can have 75% growth in our schools, yet the schools that are the most challenged do not increase to that same level. So I think the goals need to be tweaked, as well as the 100% increase in disability students and Black students. All you need is one, and you have 100%, one at each level. So I don't think these are good goals for us to use as our measuring stick for what we're doing here. And we like to talk about the past 3 years, but there are schools like STEM Academy that has not been fully accredited since 2011, 8 years. The same with Lindenwood, it's been 11 years. 6 years for Chesterfield, 5 for St. Helena, 8 for Tidewater Park, PB Young, 7 years, Ruffner, 10 years, Lake Taylor, only 1 out of 14 years, and Lake Taylor High School, 6 years. So it's more than 3 years. These schools, as I've said to you before, need something in addition to what we are providing them. A lot of you have been on this administration through several superintendents, and you're telling me that we need to do a needs assessment on what these schools are in need of to bring them up to par. We should already have that information. We should be at a point now where we can start implementing this and making a difference in the lives of the students, the teachers, and the principals who work in these schools. What I am saying is we're not talking about diversity in any kind of way. We still keep concentrating. When I look at these schools that I just named off, when you look at the elementary level, you have a certain concentration. Then we feed them up to another cohort with more students of the same type of demographics, background, and we just perpetuate that. We compound that issue throughout this system. And the kids in these schools primarily go to, ultimately, Lake Taylor and Booker T. That's right there in everyone's face to look. We have at Berkeley ECC a STEM program. Most of those students feed into STEM Academy at Campus Stella. But we don't have the same level of STEM that they had at the elementary level. So you're telling me we're going to do a needs assessment. It's obvious that we're not meeting the needs of the students, the teachers, or the principals in those schools. And I believe it all starts at the earlier level, pre-K through 3. And we're just passing them through this system and putting more responsibilities on the teachers in the next cohorts. So they have to do the job that they were hired to do, plus what didn't get accomplished in the one before them. This is what I'm seeing taking place in your numbers. And then we move them up to the high school level. So I would like you guys to come back with something a little more specific than this paintbrush presentation that we just got here that's going to make your numbers look good, but it's going to keep these particular schools and some Carlos that are in Ward 3, it's going to keep them in the same situation that they're currently in.
So I would say to that, that if we had an elephant right now, sometimes you have some board training, this would be the time to put the elephant out. And I think that Ms. Smith actually did a very good job of expressing the board's concern, because I've heard that from Ms. Campson, at least 3 phone calls in the last 48 hours. We need to be serious about this data. And she's right. All of those schools that she just listed, today has to be the day that we say no more. And it has to be through policy and budget. It comes up from you all. It comes to Dr. Birdsong. And that's not to say that you guys don't have your heart there and you're putting through all of the best strategies, but we have really got to drill down and figure out and talk about it. I mean, talk about it seriously. We're not leaving anything on the table. If there are serious issues going on in the buildings, if there are principals that need intensive PD or teachers that need intensive PD, bring it on. We want to allocate that in our budget. We want to have our policies reflect that, so that we are not just seeing the same thing over and over again. So the elephant's out there. This is what we want. It fits in right alignment with why we even have an accountability plan. And it's going to be teamwork. It's going to be us working with you all informing us, so that we can make the best decisions for kids. And so I don't take what you say as criticism. I take it as coming from the heart and really wanting to see difference. And
And we can start by reworking these goals.
Because 75% of schools show growth in reading. Why what's the other 25% doing if there's no growth? That was my next question that I couldn't get to, is the same thing. I agree entirely with Mrs. Smith that why would only 75% of schools, we're not saying 75% of schools become top performers in the first year, but why are we saying only 75% of the schools show growth?
Right, and I will also say,
No sense.
and I will also say that we do talk a lot about our schools that need that intensive help. But even in our other schools, we all know that there are kids who do struggle. And we can't let those be the children that we don't provide that assistance to as well. So, I mean, this is good conversation that we're having. This is honest. It's unfiltered. It's what we need to be doing right now, because we don't have the time to not be doing exactly what we need.
Don't have the time.
That's right. So, Mr. Jordan.
Actually, I was on the same slide that Ms. Smith was on, and I concur with much of what she said. My question was a little different. So I did have the same concerns about the measures or the goals, and whether or not they are in line with what we do have in our accountability plan. I like to see that on these presentations so we can make sure that what we have said we're trying to support you in achieving, and what is being presented, that we know whether or not they're aligned, or whether you're making recommendations that we alter them in some way. The other reason I struggled on the slide is
You're talking about 16, right? The SMARTY goal?
by June 2020
Okay.
goals.
Okay.
So I appreciate what the state and the federal government and our own system does in terms of focus on schools. In our strategic plan and in our priorities, we also talk about individual students. And so to me, what gets missing for me out of this is what the attention is on the individual student. So similar to what Ms. Smith was saying, so while having all schools do something, for some reason for me, it doesn't necessarily translate when I hear the language of individual students. And so I like to get some better sense of, as we move forward with our presentations, how we're looking at individual students and how we are advancing individual students no matter what school they're in. Dr. Gabriel just mentioned, I agree that we have this tendency to talk about schools based upon accreditation scores, but there's not a child in our school division that's perfect. And so to me, there is something as we previously used to say, trying to raise the floor and the ceiling simultaneously. I don't want any child to be left out of our goals in terms of student achievement. And then my comment on the presentation in general, I don't have the education background that Ms. Campson or some others may have. I just like to be able to understand in the presentation what worked before, how are we going to build upon what worked, what didn't work, why didn't it work, and as you talk about moving from version 1.0 of the plan to version 2.0 of the plan, what are we doing differently? I just need to get a better understanding at that level, because right now, while I think the presentation was good, I can't tell you that coming away from this, I really have a good understanding from a board's perspective what we're doing differently and what worked and what different. I think that's important for us to understand. This is not a data request, but it is a presentation request. A few years ago, we had adopted scattered plot into our graphics, which allowed us to see some things a little differently when we did school-by-school comparisons. And I would ask that we please go back and look at, in our presentation of data, how we can include scattered plots again, both within the division, but also in comparison to our performance against other like school divisions and the state.
Ms. Martin or Mr. Clanton, do either of y'all have a question? Because I'd like to go ahead and wrap up this portion of the presentations.
I think most of the things I was spoken about.
Okay. I know that you have a question, Ms. Basine, but we're already at 5 o'clock, so if you don't mind, you can just email it. I think that would be good. So Dr. Birdsong and Dr. Bailey, Dr. Cataldo, we really do appreciate your work on this matter, and I think that the presentation and the conversations that we've had are very beneficial, both for us and for you all. So thank you for your work, and definitely we know what we're going to be looking for and working on. We're going to move on to the next section of our agenda on human resources. Dr. Birdsong.
I thought we were going to vote on the acting superintendent's designee.
Right, that's the
Okay,
first.
all right, thank you. At this time, I would like to make a recommendation for my designee. I will be recommending Dr. Cataldo, Mike Cataldo, the Deputy Superintendent of Academic Affairs, acting.
Okay. All right. We accept your recommendation. Can I have a motion on the floor to accept Dr. Birdsong's recommendation for her designee?
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the recommendation of Interim Superintendent Dr. Birdsong and appointing or naming Dr. Michael Cataldo, the Acting Superintendent of Academic Affairs, as her designee.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, just a question. So this is the same acting designee that we just did a few weeks ago?
Actually, it was done in the retreat,
Right.
and due to the organizational changes, I made the new recommendation.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? Would you please call the roll?
Basine? Aye. Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Jordan?
Nay.
Gabriel?
Aye. Okay, thank you. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda, item 3.02, is review of the draft job description for the clerk of the school board. I know that we were in the process of revising this job description, and I thank Ms. Basine and Ms. Smith for working together on assimilating the feedback provided from board members. I also understand that you all had a discussion about this at the last meeting, and it was the recommendation to allow the administration to bring forth some recommendations. Dr. Birdsong, if you wouldn't mind, just bring us up to speed on what you all are proposing and how you would like for us to proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. I'm going to ask Mr. Billups to come forward. During the last business meeting, as you just stated, the school board had a chance to discuss what the job description would look like and directed the administration to go back and provide some suggestions. So our human resources expert, Mr. Tim Billups, is here and will review those revisions with us this afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, school board members. What I did was, again, with the last meeting, you all had presented a draft version in which the information that you presented that was in yellow was what you wanted to see. The information that you had presented in green was what was stricken. So what I did was, I took what you all had included and changed some things around, moved some things around, but at the same time, trying to keep the essence of what it was that you were trying to communicate. So what you see in my red line version would be certain words changed around. I may have moved around something that you said and put it somewhere else for better readability, writing for the person who would be reading this to make sure that it all flows in that manner. So I think I left out all of the things that you all did not want, except under the distinguishing characteristics. I did leave that in there because, again, this is the only position that is actually providing that support to the school board. So I think that that was important for aspiring applicants to be able to know that. But the rest of the information, it may not be exactly where you had it, but if it was in yellow, I did incorporate that into the description. And I seem to recall the last meeting, there was lively discussion about whether the degree should be required, deferred, preferred. So I did leave it in there as a preferred requirement.
Is there any discussion or questions regarding the job description that's proposed?
I have a question for you. So what is our process here? So I took the time to go through and review it. I have some comments and questions. Are we trying to do that? You want me to email it? What's the?
Oh, no. We can discuss that now. I think what we would like to do is incorporate questions or discussions so that way we can move to vote on it at the formal meeting, so they can put it out. You're happy to email them as well,
Well,
if you want to.
I'd like to go through them, if it's
Sure.
okay.
Go ahead.
So, let's see if I can go back to the top. Under essential functions, where we have the coordinates plans, manages all activities related to school board meetings to include supporting and assisting with the development of the agenda. I think there should be a period right there after agenda. And I think with input from the board, chair, superintendent, vice chair, isn't necessary for the job description. That could change based upon whatever protocols or processes that we use. So I'm not sure that that's necessary for the job description. That's just my opinion.
Jordan, if you don't mind, if we could on that particular item there, because I think that's taken directly from the policy. So it's not a protocol, so it would require a vote from us to change it. So.
Yes and no. So the policy, when it comes to agenda development, the policy goes beyond that, where it speaks to how individual school board members are able to provide input into the agenda process. That's what I'm saying, that I don't think it's necessary for a job description. I'm not saying that the policy needs to change. I'm just saying that what the board clerk would be asked to do is to do the things that are mentioned in assisting with the development of the agenda.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that I'm talking about the policy and changing it, but I'm just saying is that I think that an incumbent or anyone who is an applicant for the role would need to know who they would be working with and giving them clear direction as to, we have a process through policy which states that our agenda is created through a agenda planning meeting. So making that clear in the job application lets them know that who they're going to be working with and creating that. There's 3 individuals.
All I'm suggesting is I don't think that what's there is clear, and I don't think it's necessary. So I'm just
Okay.
giving my input. Whatever the board decides to do is fine.
So you said a period after agenda, and then
Yes.
to take out the with input from the board chair, superintendent, vice chair.
And I'll email this too. I just
Okay,
wanted,
that would,
I just
okay.
was trying to go through, I didn't know we were gonna go point for point. For the next paragraph, it says, or it states, prepares reports for the school board as requested by the superintendent and provides adequate follow-up. I just didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what reports it was referring to. Generally speaking, I think reports to the board should come from the administrative leadership. The clerk should ensure that the reports are following any agreed-upon formats and that the reports are distributed timely. I think this is a quality assurance function, not a content function, so I just wasn't real sure on what that meant and what reports it was referring to. On the, I guess, page 2, the paragraph, last sentence, develops transcriptions for approval and insertion into the board's official records. I'm not sure if that's trying to imply that we are expecting the clerk to transcribe meetings. I don't think that's been our practice. I think the minutes and what's happening is appropriate, but I wasn't sure if that last one was suggesting that we were doing transcriptions for approval, and if so, that's fine, but that just caught my attention.
Mr. Billups, did you want to speak to that part at all?
As far as developing the transcriptions?
Right.
Again, that was something that you all had included, and I left it there because I felt as though there could be times when that may be a need
Okay.
for the clerk to do.
For the job?
It didn't
Okay.
sound as though it was outside of the scope of responsibility, so I thought that it would be better to be inclusive of that as opposed to not.
I yield to your expertise. It just caught my attention because I wasn't sure that we were doing transcriptions. The paragraph serves as liaison with the school board attorney when directed by the superintendent of school board. I think that needs to be defined or limited.
Where's that again, Mr. Jordan?
I don't,
Sixth paragraph, the sixth paragraph.
serves as liaison with the school board attorney when directed by the superintendent of school board. I think I know what it means, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. And I think we need to define it and be limited, and that may be in our operational practice versus in the job description.
Okay.
Then the last comment I had was, monitors activities to ensure that school board actions are disseminated in a complete, accurate, appropriate, and timely manner. Also not sure what that means or what it's intended to mean. So those are my comments, and I'll sit up to you.
Okay.
Other further comments?
Madam Chair, if I can just bring clarity here. We have a job description here. I know Mr. Jordan's just given us several recommendations. We're supposed to vote on this item, I guess, next week at our meeting. So can we just clearly define how we're going to address the recommendations that he just mentioned in time to be able to take timely action on this next
Well, that
week?
was the question I asked earlier. I'm not, as I mentioned before, the whole process is a little awkward for me because I'm not sure how you take all of us and meld it into the job description process. But since it was there, I just did the assignment. So I don't know what the process is. I just wanted to share with the board as a whole and the administration things that caught my attention. And, I trust them to be able to see whether or not it's worthy of any reconsideration or not. I just wanted to give them the benefit of my review from my experience. And you did bring up one other thing for a question where it says unusual demands. What does that mean? Under qualifications?
You might be called on a Sunday to post something.
Yeah.
That's,
Oh.
Yeah.
just be prepared to work as
Okay.
needed by the board or superintendent.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be like every weekend, but whenever
I didn't-
necessary.
because me, you have to talk to me every other day. I didn't know what it meant, so.
Yeah,
So,
we just need to make that clear, because sometimes people will question, do I have to answer emails after 4:30? Do I have to work on the weekend? So we just need it to be clear that there will be times when the school board clerk is needed.
Thank you.
Okay, so as far as clear direction, process-wise, this is something that the board has undertaken because there was a lot of concern about it. And we do have an acting clerk right now. I think that there was collaboration in putting out what the job description was. We gathered feedback. The feedback was assembled. We looked to Dr. Birdsong and administration to give us their review, because ultimately, the board has one employee. The clerk, even by code, is supervised by the superintendent. And so I would say that we need to make sure that this gets posted. I certainly want to incorporate everyone's feedback. So I think that the items that you needed clarity on, Mr. Jordan, it would be perfectly fine for Mr. Billups, Dr. Birdsong to provide that clarity, but it sounded like the area that you wanted to change was on the first page where it said with the period and then delete everything else. To me, that's how I interpreted your comments.
Well, there were those, and then there were areas where I thought they needed to be defined. And again, it's not my intent to drag all this out in this meeting. I just wanted the full board and administration to have the benefit of the work that I did and to share it with the board. And we'll find out next week what the draft looks like, but I just wanted to have the benefit of my input.
So then I would ask Dr. Birdsong to take Mr. Jordan's comments into consideration. Are there any board members who feel one way or the other about the items that Mr. Jordan has proposed?
I think the first item I made it quite clear that I didn't think it needed to be changed.
So where does that leave the administration? We have one board member saying take it out and another saying leave it in. So we need some clear direction.
Ms. Basine?
I agree with that too, as for a job description to be, more concise. I'll restate my concern with the bachelor's degree, I think, or a person could have, a lot of experience in this arena, and we certainly don't want to exclude individuals who may be highly qualified in terms of experience because of that, even though I know it says preferred,
Right.
but it says and. I see it as, I'm not really gonna, get the job because it's preferred.
Preferred means preferred, like we prefer that, but it's
I'm
not
very
required.
clear on what the definition
Yeah.
of preferred is,
So-
but I know what preferred means, but I'm
So
stating
I'm a
that
little
I don't know that we need to say that, is what I'm saying. But thank you for that.
I'll state that I accept the recommendation that's been put forward by Dr. Birdsong and your team that has incorporated the comments brought forth by the board. So I support your recommendations. I certainly understand Mr. Jordan's comment with regards to input from the board chair, superintendent, and vice chair. But I think that as for a job description who will be supervised by the superintendent and given direction by the board chair, those things can be further elaborated upon.
I was just going back to the degree thing, I honestly think that this person might graduate degree, and it'd be a very more robust position. So I just wanted to state that. So I'm very happy with I'm content with the bachelor's degree preferred, because I would actually like to ask for more.
Are you comfortable with the draft that has been proposed by Dr. Birdsong and team?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Campson? Mr. Clinton?
I am, but I just want to clarify on that, because I know we had a lengthy discussion about preferred.
Okay.
And like I said, whatever the group will of the board was, but I want to point out the second sentence that's in that particular area. It says, any combination amount of education, knowledge, skills, and experience may be considered for minimum qualifications. And that means that you don't have to have a degree, but we'll take in all of those things. So I felt like the paragraph here was actually a great meld of kind of meeting both statements that were being made on both sides. So I just wanted to point that out.
Question. So, Dr. Gay, I wasn't quite sure what your statement was in reference to my comments.
Well, I think that Dr. Birdsong needs direction for what to post for our agenda item formal meeting. And so I'm asking everyone, do they, with regards to your comments, do they feel that it is important to change them as you have brought forth, or are they happy with what we have right now? Because she needs to have direction. That's what I'm taking from Dr. Birdsong.
Because you have,
Timeline? Is there a timeline that we have for this or something?
so if the expectation is for you to vote next Wednesday, then I would say if we could have the information, definitely, today is Wednesday. If we need to have it posted by Friday for your review again, then we would need any revisions by close of business tomorrow.
And this will be a discussion item. We can have it separate so we can discuss it, but I mean,
I asked at the beginning what the process was, then I was giving my comments, and then I thought the question was, I thought the question was looking for direction between my view of putting the period after the agenda, Mr. Clanton's view of having it more elaborated, and then I thought that was the question, but then it sounded like then we started polling around the whole thing, so I just
Yeah.
wasn't.
so
what? That's what I'm trying to get some clarity on. What are we doing? You want me to send this stuff or not?
I mean,
I think that we have to take care of it in this meeting so that we can give clear direction to the administration so they can post it on Friday so that we can vote on it next week. If I could ask the chair if we could just, about the period or keeping the word there, or about all of what you stated. I mean, I think that she's just doing the round robin to find out, to straw poll where we might want to go without taking an official vote.
I just wanted to get clarity, and I will say that while we're doing all this, I'm not even sure that why we can't maintain the acting clerk until we finish our superintendent search. So I'll just put that there. So
all right.
I'll send you my comments, and you can do with it what you will.
Okay, thank you.
And so,
So is it-
So when we have a discussion item, sometimes there are points that are brought up that are really relevant and really, other board members will see it and say, you know what, that's a good point, and I understand it and I support it. But you have brought up a point, and thank you for bringing it up, but I don't hear from others that they are asking Dr. Birdsong to go back and change anything for right now. So in fairness to them and the timeline that they are under, if there are comments that you would like to be considered, I would say she needs them by close of business tomorrow, and we will put this on as an agenda voting item for our formal meeting, and we will take action on it.
so when you say, to be clear, consider, so that means there could be things that maybe the board, it's not the will of the board. Ms. Martin may decide that, no, I want a master's degree, I'm gonna add that. So we get that feedback, and Ms. Smith may come up with something else.
Honestly, Dr. Birdsong,
Yes.
this has been out on board docs for a while, and the time has expired for those types of questions. What we have before us is the expert opinion of our HR director and your opinion, and I would like to,
Well, then, we could have settled this a
If I
long
could.
time ago.
The time hasn't necessarily fully expired for any changes. Just like at the last meeting when we brought this last month, we did an amendment. So the last opportunity for changes is at the time of a vote. You all can make amendments to it at that particular point, vote it up and down, but we just need to give direction to the administration to bring us a product that we can take under consideration. So next week, we have an opportunity to discuss, vote, take action, and move forward.
Just like to clarify what I said, and what I meant by direction. I'm not a human resource professional. I yield to the human resource professional. Not a superintendent, I yield to the superintendent. I was asked to review the document. There were some questions that, as I read it, I did not understand. So I'm sharing with you what I didn't understand, and my statement earlier was I yield to you to determine whether or not you think my lack of understanding encourages any additional clarity or not. And then I'm comfortable. So I intend to send to you the comments that I made here, and I am comfortable with however the administration chooses to respond to or consider the comments that I've offered.
What about the addition of new comments that the board has not
No.
had an opportunity to vet?
No new
Okay.
comments.
Thank you.
Mm-mm.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, on to the next item on the agenda, educational planning, item 4.01. Dr. Birdsong.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gabriel, Mr. Clanton, members of the board. I'm going to ask John Hazelet to come forward. He is our acting deputy superintendent of operations. He will be providing us with an update on Maury High School Phase 2. Some information was provided to you during your retreat this summer, and Mr. Hazelet has additional information to share. And then after that, I'm sure you will want an update on the Lake Taylor School, or formerly known as Lake Taylor Middle School, whatever you choose to call it right now. We're calling it the Lake Taylor School just for identification purposes right now. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hazelet.
Dr. Gabriel, Mr. Clanton, members of the board, Dr. Birdsong, thank you. As Dr. Birdsong indicated, I'm here to just provide a brief update on the current status of the Maury High School Review Project. In June of last year, 2018, HBA Architects and Cooperative Strategies collaborated on what's being referred to as Phase 1 to develop the educational specifications for Maury High School. And to just give you an overview, that process included an exploration of current and future educational programs, school tours across the Commonwealth, tours of the Eastern Virginia Medical School instructional space, along with some strategic meetings for future program alignment between the two. 3 full-day planning labs, lab workshops with community and school folks, and 3 basic community meetings. We are now ready to move to Phase 2, which is the feasibility study. And as you're all aware, the Maury High School is over 100 years old and is in need of some repair. I think that goes without saying. So the next phase of the work will, first and foremost, it'll incorporate the educational specifications that have just been developed into whatever the new Maury High School needs to look like. They will do a full analysis of the building condition. They will analyze space needs as that interacts with and flows with the educational specifications. And then they will come up with a recommendation for a solution that's to the best interest of the students for a 21st century learning environment. The request for proposal for Phase 2 is ready to go. We expect that that process will take from 30 to 45 days from advertisement to award of a contract. And then once that award is made, it'll take about 6 to 7 months to do the study, to do the full study, at which time, as a part of the RFP, the successful vendor will come in and do a full brief for the board of their findings. So you'll have all that information. And as Dr. Birdsong said, it's my understanding prior to my time that all this work was approved prior to, and this was intended as an update going forward so we can move on with Phase 2. And I'm happy to answer whatever questions I might be able to, or I will move on.
Questions from the board?
So we have your support to move forward with the study, with putting out the RFP.
Board
Clear?
members?
Okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I guess the only question I had, and I guess we'll talk about it tomorrow, and I apologize, but we have facilities committee. We were working on some things. I know we got a presentation update on that. One of the things that I had shared with in working with the facilities committee this year is trying to make sure that we're not occupying staff time unnecessarily. So as a board, I do think we still need to come back and talk about what our expectations are of our committees. In particular, I would like to get an understanding of the facilities committee, because our intent was to come and try to make some recommendations, big picture, aligned with the accountability plan and so forth. So I think we're going to have a meeting tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And maybe we'll get an opportunity then to revisit that work, but I just wanted to put out there that at some point, we either need some direction from the board, whether to move forward down a path or whether to just get out the staff's way, so.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jordan. To be clear, during July, one of the items on the retreat agenda was to discuss the Phase 2, and the question around that was why hadn't the administration done anything to move Phase 2 forward? And so that's why I asked Mr. Hazelette to engage that work again, just to assure you that we're ready to do that, to put steps in place to do that, and we're ready, and we just wanted to share that with you.
Okay,
Like, we're
well,
ready to
yeah.
go.
Okay.
Based on your concerns a couple of months ago, as in the board's concerns.
I was going to reiterate that's what I heard when we were in that meeting on that one. I'm totally in alignment with you on as far as the big pictures what we're looking at, but this was something that we identified early last school year, and so I'm glad to see that it's coming here, and I'm in agreement to have it move forward.
Next item.
The next item is also me, and that's just a brief update on Lake Taylor, the school formerly referred to as the former Lake Taylor Middle School. As was the case across the district, the first day of school was special for Lake Taylor as a transition from a traditional K-8 middle school to a 3-8 school. And the purpose of this is to give you just a snapshot on some of the work that was done as part of that transition. And the Lake Taylor School for grades 3 through 5 transitioned 16 classrooms for that grade from Fairlawn, provided dedicated music and art classrooms, added whiteboards, bookcases, additional storage throughout the building, bulletin boards throughout the hallways for display of student work, painting, the general painting and general aesthetics improvements have all been completed, and a bus route was added, and I know this was one of the first things that I was asked to address when I came on, about adding a route from Fairlawn Rec Center to the school, both in the morning, pick up students for before school care, and then after school care to take them back to the rec center. That has been implemented. As to the middle school portion of that, there was a build-out of special education classroom spaces, a new bus ramp and turnaround area with driveway for special ed service was created on the west side of the building. A new computer lab, a conversion of a new science lab and prep area was done, painting and general aesthetics there as well, and demolition and removal of all the old mobile units at Lake Taylor. They're all gone. And as a general note, all the fixtures, furniture, and equipment adjustments have been made so they are all age appropriate. And then we have effectively a scope of work was developed at the beginning of this project, and other than a few minor ongoing things, which primarily are improving lighting in classrooms, the work is effectively done. As for Fairlawn, there have been some minor tweaks for technology improvements, painting, general cleanup. All the mobile units at Fairlawn are gone except for one. That one should be gone in the next 30 days. And the only item that's really left on that is there's a solution they've come up with for the door that separates the rec center from the school, and they're waiting on a couple of parts for that. Mr. Johnson is here, and he's going to tell me an update.
So, Mr. Johnson, do you mind coming to the table? Thank you. Maybe, maybe not.
Where's your coat and tie? I know he's working. He's always working.
For Ed.
Piece was completed today. I got
Yes,
word after I spoke
thank
with
you.
him.
Perfect.
So
Thank
we have security on our building versus access from the rec center.
Perfect.
Perfect.
So it was done in 30 days, is that it?
Yes.
So I was still correct,
Hey.
okay. All right,
Yeah.
don't go anywhere, Danny.
Check it
You're the
off
one
on
that should
school
be up here
dude.
anyway. Yeah, and I will say that I've spoken to all the principals involved, and they report the transition has gone well, other than the normal hiccups that you have with the first week of school. Ironically, maybe it's not ironic, they're both experiencing some challenges with car riders. A lot of that is typical of the first week of school, but there are a lot of parents that are bringing their children, bringing them to school, and the line is out into the roadway, and it's creating a little bit of problem. Transportation has met, and the police department has worked, especially with Fairlawn, to address that. So that's in the hopper for some adjustments. As to Poplar Halls, that building should be effectively closed out next month. And the Virginia Department of Education has been notified. The notification has been submitted to them for the closure of Poplar Hall and the reclassification of Lake Taylor. And lastly, and I'm glad that Mr. Johnson is here, he and his team have done a stellar job this summer. A lot of work had to get done to make that transition, and I want to personally thank you and commend you and your team for all that work, and also for Carol Robinson. I don't know if Carol's here, but Carol, who's in charge of purchasing and supply, was the project manager for that, and was so detail-oriented on everything to a point that was a fault at some point, but very, very detail-oriented to make sure that all the Ts were crossed and the Is were dotted, and they both did a tremendous job in making that happen, and so I thank them both for that.
Are there any board questions? Ms. Smith and Ms. Basine?
Dr. Birdsong, how can we keep SOL reporting for grades 3 through 5 independent of the reporting for grades 6 through 8?
We can disaggregate the data based on grade levels.
And even in that, will they still, though, be reported separately? Because we tend to do things by school, but this school has 2 separate principals, basically co-located in the same building. And in my mind, that doesn't necessarily dictate that everything should be combined for them either.
We will treat them as we do ADL with their data and disaggregating it by grade level, because technically they are now considered to be a school. And so, but we can still, that doesn't prevent us from disaggregating the data.
But that's just presentation, right? When you
I'm not
disaggregate it, you're just presenting it separately, but it's going to be rolled up when it's counted in terms of
The school's accreditation level.
at that-
State level, yes.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that decision was made last year, Ms. Smith, so.
It doesn't matter when the decision was made.
I know, but what I'm saying, we can't change it at
Yeah,
this point.
Yeah, I think the point is trying to clarify that when we made the
Yeah,
vote
I mean, I get that.
at the state level, they recorded as a combined school.
Right.
And now I understand
Okay,
that.
yeah.
I just wish I'd have understood that
Oh, okay.
at the time.
Ms. Basine?
Okay. Do we have a sense of how many families, students from Ingleside made a choice to stay over there? You may not have that information
Sorry, I
right
don't.
now. Yeah. Okay, I was just curious.
We can pull that if you'd like us to.
I just, if anyone else is interested to know, we said that, yeah, we said that we wanted to provide that opportunity. We heard that from our parents during community meetings, and I just would like some follow-up information to see if that was taken advantage of, yeah.
It also impacted the potential bus route.
Yes,
Yes.
right,
It-
right.
It's past potential. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the point is, we don't know. It could have been 0 students, right?
Right.
So we don't,
Well,
we don't necessarily
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and to follow it, so the car rider, the situation, which I recall that being, since my time on the board, we've had just, I recall that with Southside STEM, I believe, and ADL as well, like the start of the school year, trying to figure out how that whole operation would work. But it also reminded me that are the car riders those that are coming from the zone for Ingleside, and if that's just, or is that a separate issue from that piece? So just something to look into.
In my opinion, the car, and I haven't gotten into the, this was just brought to my attention today, the car rider issue at Lake Taylor, I think is easier solved because you've got much more space to be able to deal with that with parking lots.
Yeah.
Fairlawn's a real challenge. Fairlawn's always been a challenge, and it's just exacerbated now because of the distance of you have kids that are coming, nobody from around the school.
Yeah.
And so, but again, a lot of that is parents the first few days or the
Yeah,
first week of school,
right.
They want to take their child instead of
Right.
letting them ride the bus. And the principal told me she should not have any problems with her buses as far as getting there on time. That was very refreshing to hear. I'm going to follow up with them and do an observation myself, so.
Well, really a quick remark. When we look at the Lake Taylor School, it's moving to a K-8 school, so I'm not quite sure why we even consider Fairlawn to be a separate school. To me, it's part of the K-8 combined school that has 2 locations, the way Little Creek has 2 building locations. So just throwing it out there to add a little more
Okay.
thought, but to me, it's a K-8 combined already, which is the direction we're headed. We'll just get them all together in 2 years. But real quick, the only thing I really wanted to say is congratulations. I'm flabbergasted. I all summer I would drive by, it's close to my house, to see if we were getting all those things we asked to get done, and to have that much done. And I know Mr. Hazelet's here now, but we know who was the person that got it done, and I think I'd like to give him a big hand, because,
Yes,
whoa,
I
that's
agree.
impressive. That's what we want to see
Standing
happen
ovation.
it's what we want to see happen in our buildings when we're saying we need to have this problem solved in the buildings. This is, and certainly Carol also, both of you together, great job. Great job, especially getting rid of those horrible trailers.
Okay.
Mobile units.
Mobile units,
Well,
yes,
whatever,
okay,
trailers.
all right. Okay, Mr. Jordan, and then we're going to wrap up this
Just-
portion of the conversation.
2 quick things. By mobile units being removed, you mean they're out of the Norfolk Public Schools inventory, or they've been moved somewhere in the Norfolk Public Schools inventory? And then on the bus that is providing transportation to before and after care at the rec center, just moving forward, I'd just like to have an understanding of, to whom do we offer that service? To some schools, to all schools, how that process works? Now I just like to understand, we have an equity policy, and we're looking at mobile units and other things, and so if it's a policy or a practice that we provide before and after care transportation for all schools, I say hallelujah. If we're doing it on selective means, I'd like to know what those selective means are.
Probably a transition thing. Is there
Yeah, that was my understanding, Mr. Jordan, that was promised to parents last year, and so we wanted to make sure that we had that in place,
So
because that was a concern of
So it's
the
temporary
parents.
then?
I'm not saying it's temporary, I'm saying we put it in place because we were told that that was one of the promises made to the community, that if before and after care was something that the parents wanted, but were concerned about transportation, that we would put that in place for them.
And just to be clear, I'm comfortable if that was the decision that we made. I'm saying that we also receive requests like that from
And we
other
hear
schools and
you.
other parents. I just want to have an understanding of where we do it,
Sure.
where we don't, and if there are any policies involved with that decision-making.
If I may, just 2 points. In a lot of cases, the elementary schools have their own before and after-school care in the building.
Yes.
So that addresses it at, I would say, the majority of the schools. The other ones, that if the rec center or the center, whatever it may be, is in the attendance zone for that school, my experience, from my older experience, that we would accommodate them. Whether that's still the case, Mr. Jordan, I've been removed from it for a while, so I'd have to
Yeah,
I'd have to, I'd have to do a little bit more research.
right, and that's the policy question that we have, because sometimes if parents are trying to provide convenience to before and after care program, whether it's at a school or not, we get these, at least I know I hear them, these requests. And so I just want to make sure from a policy perspective and from an equity perspective, we take a look at it.
Can I add just one more comment? I'm sorry, I know you're on time, but that's important in that there are children that go to a particular before or after school program, and then because they want to go to a school that serves, and that's your school assignment is based on your home address, not the before and after school location. So that creates additional challenges, as well as people away to beat the out-of-district system.
In the shift. So if there's a school that starts at 9:30 and parents have to be at work at a certain time, these things come up.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, item 4.03, deals with our CTE discussion. As you all know, Mr. Clinton and I brought to you an update as to where we are right now in the CTE discussions with our smaller working group consistent of the mayor, the vice mayor, Dr. Birdsong. The city manager hadn't technically been involved. They're in transition right now, but definitely also Greater Norfolk Corporation. So what we have brought forward to you today, and I'm going to allow Mr. Clinton to brief the board on what the proposal is, but we would like to reaffirm essentially the resolution that the board made back in March of 2015, and I'll let Mr. Clinton take it from there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gabriel. So again, we made a presentation at the last work session about an update about what was happening in some of the committee meetings regarding the CTE school. And again, it was brought about the 2015 action that was taken by this board. And as we all know, every year new boards come in, and there really hasn't been an official vote of anything from school boards, from any of the latter school boards about CTE. And so really, this resolution coming back here is just to reaffirm that we are still looking at building a CTE school, that we still are looking at the aspect of a full-time academic career and technical high school, and that to negotiate the development of a charter application for our review. And so that's what this is coming back forth to you. And so I'll just kind of actually read the resolution as it's presented. It says, whereas on March 18, 2015, the Norfolk City School Board endorsed continued planning for a full-time CTE high school. Whereas the motion introduced by Dr. Brad Robinson, seconded by Dr. Noel Gabriel, to move to endorse the principle of continued planning for the full-time academic career and technical education high school and negotiate the development of the charter application for our review. Whereas the motion unanimously carried with 7 yeas and 0 nays by roll call, which included Chairman Dr. Kirk T. Houston, Vice Chairman Ms. Courtney R. Dole, Dr. Noel Gabriel, Reverend Ed K. Haywood, Mr. Rodney Jordan, Dr. Braden Robinson, and Dr. Warren A. Stewart. Now therefore be it resolved that the Norfolk City School Board approves the March 18, 2015 action that was unanimously supported by the school board to endorse the continued planning for the full-time academic career and technical high school and negotiate the development of the charter application for our review. So we're not saying what the school is looking like. We're pretty much just saying that we're still open to this as a board. We still want this process to go and to signal to our partners at the city, partners at Greater Norfolk Corporation, philanthropists, that we're open to seeing what other proposals that they'll bring to this board. So this is what this motion does.
And the next step is going to be that we formally adopt this on our formal meeting next week. So this will be an item for vote. Scene.
I trying to figure out how to say this. I'm confused by this resolution. It was posted 2 hours ago, 2 hours before the start of our meeting. I'm not sure who or why it was drafted, given that at least since the time that I've been on the board and since the time that this was done, we haven't stopped planning the CTE high school. So are we going to make resolutions for everything that we're doing right now that's in progress? Because A lot has happened around CTE since then. I said it at the last time when the update was provided. I'm unclear as to why this resolution is being put forward, because the planning, as you know, from the countless, well, at least several presentations Ms. Goshen has done for us, planning hasn't stopped. So can you share your thoughts behind this?
Sure, Mr. Flanagan.
So, I guess we could just go back to 2015. Well,
It's my question.
Good
Why?
question. Why?
Yeah.
Who was sitting in that seat in 2015?
I was not sitting in that
Exactly,
seat.
you weren't here. Neither was I.
But I've been
Neither was Ms. Martin, neither was Ms. Campson, nor Ms. Smith. None of us were sitting here. So we, as a voice of this board, have not taken an official stance or communicated to our constituents or anyone in the community that we support the continuation. And so what's being asked is for this board to take some type of action to say we support the continued planning, the research, and for someone to come to us with a plan. The other thing is that 2015, we had a different superintendent. We had another superintendent after that. So what I'm saying is that this resolution just doesn't change anything. It says that this board is taking an official action to say that we still confirm and that we approve what was taken on March 18th of 2015, and us to reaffirm in this current cycle as a fully elected board, because we weren't at that time, that we support this action. So that's the major difference in that.
And the resolution was on board docs, and it has been on board docs. The whereas portions are just details, but the resolution has been on board docs.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Well, maybe you're seeing a version that I didn't, because I know that I saw it on there. Ms. Tanner?
Yes, it has been.
It's written, it's not an attached document, it's written in there, but, Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, I saw what was on board docs. It referenced the vote that we took in 2015. I'm very much in objection to the process here. We have a joint meeting with, when this issue was walked on at a recent meeting, when you made the presentation, I thought the presentation said this had something to do with the governor's presentation around providing potential resources and support for a regional career pathway center. So I got that piece. In May, I guess at a council work session in the newspaper, there was talk about there was going to be some charter school, which at the time didn't make any sense to me because the charter-like model has always been there. In the presentation that you made in terms of this discussion, one of the things that you had in there from 2015 was the consideration of who was going to hire the principal for this school. And what I did earlier today, I just went back and looked at the video from the meeting where we discussed and passed this resolution, and what the board and the superintendent at the time did was to grant Greater Norfolk Corporation the opportunity to come and sit at the table at a work session workshop and have a discussion with the board about the resolution, the purpose, and the intent. In 2015, there was some question about whether or not there was still a commitment on council's part and on the philanthropic community's part for advancing this. So the reason that we were asked to do the resolution at that time was that Greater Norfolk said they would ask us to do a resolution. They would then take that resolution over to City Council, and part of that was supposed to be part of a strategy to bring the funding that we needed and all of the things that would go into defining the work. That was done. Significant work has been done, and significant staff time has been spent from 2015. I don't think there's any reason to go back to redo this resolution at this time. If we are going to do the resolution, then I think it would be good to do the resolution, if any, after we have a joint meeting with council. Last year, we didn't have any joint meetings with council. Following your presentation, I met with the mayor, may have been the next day. And so I'm not clear on what I heard the mayor communicate to me, what is being communicated here. I just have a lot of concerns and hesitancy about this action. The timeliness of it, the intent, the purpose. We're going to talk about norms and protocols in a moment. I think the benefit for the administration to be helping to draft these resolutions. Last night I was at City Council as an individual, and they were voting on a resolution of the support of the Greater Norfolk Corporation's partnership for Norfolk's Innovation Corridor. And the very professionally done resolution, reviewed by the attorneys, helped put together by the attorneys, reviewed by the appropriate staff person. And in their Innovation Corridor, it kind of follows the Elizabeth River Trail. It starts on the east side at the footprint of Norfolk State, but their Innovation Corridor, which includes a technology zone, which encourages business development and trying to mine talent to meet our technology needs. The current zone goes all the way up to Virginia Beach Boulevard in Reservoir Avenue, right there in central Brambleton. And so one of the suggestions that I made to the council was to consider expanding the map so that it encompassed Booker T, that it encompassed the Broad Creek area, and that we stay within the work that has been going on in terms of having the CT at Booker T and it aligning with this Innovation Corridor. So I'd like to have more understanding and discussion about where we're going. Last year we asked for presentations and updates, and we were denied the opportunity to receive those presentations and updates. And I just feel better that I don't know what's so urgent about next week. I think we can put this on the agenda for our conversation, joint conversation with council, and make sure we're all on the same page, and then take any action if necessary following that meeting.
Okay. Well, Ms. Campson.
I listened to the resolution, I'd read it before anyway, which did not designate any particular location, any particular who's going to be the principal or who's going to choose the principal. Basically, it simply said that 4.5 years later, when we still have no CTE school from the resolution that was made in 2015, that this school board, with the new membership, 5 out of 7 people are new, are still standing behind and willing to partner with Greater Norfolk and whoever's putting it together, to move it forward. It's time to move it forward. How many more postponements are we going to do? Yes, I don't think we have time to keep postponing it and postponing it. It's time to commit to a CTE school for our children. We're very college-focused, and that's great. But it's time to be career-focused. We continue to graduate children who are not going to college, and they're not ready to get a job. It's time to do something, people. How much longer? People in the city want to have a place for their children. The lady that does my nails, nice job, said how she wished, we just talked about this last week, in the shop, everyone's standing around talking about it, and they're all saying, boy, if I had just had that when my child finished. He went through Norfolk Public Schools. Now, fortunately, he's got an apprenticeship, but it took him 3 years to get there because we didn't provide it. And it's time to take action. This is a teeny tiny action step. It's not saying where it's going, because I know we all have disagreements on that. It's not saying who's going to pick the principal. It's just saying Norfolk Public School Board Norfolk Public Schools School Board is saying, yes, we're ready to get moving on the CTE school. Let's move on it. Let's move on it. I'm ready to vote today. Thank you.
Ms. Basine?
We've been moving on it, and I think the comments that were just made are indicative of why greater conversation needs to be had on it to be sure that we are all on the same page, along with our city leaders and the Greater Norfolk Corporation, because the comprehensive CTE high school, as I know it, is not a VOTEC center. It is not for some kids. It can be for all kids, even those who are college-bound, and we need to get that message clear to everyone. It is for anyone who is willing to have a college and career opportunity. It is not a VOTEC center. It is not for some
Buddy
kids.
said it was.
I'm just saying that I heard it, I've been hearing it, and.
That's your
You
interpretation.
know, it's not, I'm not talking about just the comments that were just made. I'm talking about comments that I hear in the community. And even some of the comments from people that I know are involved in even the planning of it. It is supposed to be a comprehensive school that provides advanced opportunities for students as well. And to the notion that we've been so focused on college, I say, no, we aren't. And we need to keep our eye on that as well. So.
No one is discounting, no one on this board is discounting the work that currently is underway with Ms. Goshen at all. No one discounts the apprenticeship programs that we currently have or the CTE courses that are offered in any of our high schools. I think Ms. Campson actually did a very good job with saying, all we're asking for this composition of the board to do is to say, continue with the planning in order to reaffirm. The small working group is the mayor, is the vice mayor, is Greater Norfolk Corporation. We discussed this with them. We told them we will be bringing this to the board for discussion and then for vote. We will be having a board and council meeting on October the 1st, and this will be a topic of discussion. Dr. Birdsong is planning with Ms. Goshen on what those details and things are going to be. But I think that it is important for us to vote and to have public record that we are committed to this program, because it is vital, not just for the students that we graduate, but for the jobs that are in need right now, our community partners. And so we don't, if there is a notion that it is a VOTEC center, that's not what it is, and that's not what I have heard. But I understand that we all hear from different individuals. So what I would say to those who have concern about this is share that concern, share why you are opposed to voting for this, what suggestions you have in order to make yourself more comfortable with it, and that would be good for our discussion.
And I additionally would like to know from Dr. Birdsong and Ms. Goshen, who we haven't heard from either at the last meeting or today, about why this resolution is necessary to move forward. Is it necessary?
Well, from my perspective, as I am sitting in these meetings to discuss the comprehensive high school, I want to make sure that board members are included and are aware of what's going on before we make any decisions to move forward. So that's one reason why this resolution is so important to me.
Mr. Jordan?
So I'm trying to make sure I understood. I guess I'm supposed to express why I'm opposed. I'm not opposed. I have questions about understanding. I appreciate Ms. Campson's comments. When I watched the video from May 2015, you were sitting right behind me. You were in a different role at that time. So I appreciate the work and the conversation, discussion that's been going on with this. I'm concerned because over this past school year, we've not been inclusive. We've not had conversations. When I was at the San Antonio National School Board Association meeting and recommended that Bill Simons come and address the school board and others, the full school board didn't get the benefit of hearing that presentation. And the intent was to make sure that all of us were on the same page in terms of what a CT school was and why it was important. I know that the Greater Norfolk Corporation is still looking at Worcester as the model. I might be mistaken, but I might be the only one at the table that's actually had the opportunity to visit Worcester and see it. And I think that's something that we should do as well. So I'm not trying to stop anything. I'm confused about what we're being asked to approve. Again, there is context to the resolution that we did and the charter discussion that we had. And I would encourage, if you have not watched the video, go watch the video of the meeting and get the context of the discussion. Don't just pull the resolution out of a vacuum and not have the benefit of the content of the discussion, because we did have a discussion. The other piece that is no longer clear to me, I know what we were discussing in terms of the charter-like model as we looked at a school board-driven charter, somewhat like the model that of the Green Run School in Virginia Beach. The conversations that have been held, at least based upon the reporting in the press, it is unclear to me what the charter-like model is today. So I like to have the benefit of hearing from Greater Norfolk Corporation and the city what that view is. I would add that, as I was mentioned earlier with the Facilities Committee piece, we were having conversations around facility needs. Our comprehensive, or our accountability plan calls for this 5-year capital program. So what's being discussed is that in the case of a comprehensive CTE, now there is funding, because before we were hearing that there wasn't funding. How does that relate to the big picture? Are we talking about 6 high schools or 5 high schools? In the documentation that Mr. Clanton provided the last time, it had old information in there in terms of going back and looking at how big the school was supposed to be, how many schools there were going to exist. We were back to having the discussion around the regional piece, where I think we had come to some conclusion that the regional piece, the school is envisioned to also have an adult component, and that would encompass the regional piece.
Okay.
So I think that there are things that are worthy of discussion. This is a work session. I have questions. I've asked these questions all year. Over and over again, I was told the school was dead because there was no money. Then all of a sudden, in the last 30 days, there's money. So I wanted to get clarity. I sent you all an email back in July because there was an agenda item on council where they were going to discuss the CT school. I sent you all an email and asked, was anybody aware of anything? The only person that responded to me was Attorney Cloud. Then a week or so later, you all presented that you were in these meetings. So I like to have the benefit of a briefing and an understanding of exactly what we are proposing here before I am supportive of the resolution. And again, I think the resolution can come after.
We're going to wrap it up. Not to be rude, but we're going to.
Well,
I know Mr. Clanton had a
is
question.
rude.
It is.
I think it is rude.
I mean, but
No,
I haven't interrupted
I
you,
just
and I
wanted to
haven't.
finish. I just want to finish my sentence,
Okay.
if I may, which I can't even remember now. So go ahead.
Mr. Clanton.
I appreciate feedback, but I just want to clarify that what's being presented here, and I've heard a lot of innuendos about the attorneys and whatever else about a motion, but it's a very sound motion. That's being put. I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Jordan, but this is not telling anyone that we're going with size of school, or this is saying that we as new board members have an opportunity to vote and say that we want to continue, and that to send a message to council, to the philanthropic community, Greater Norfolk Corporation, that we are open to continue. Yes, there have been a lot of planning, and all that planning, and just like you, Mr. Jordan, back in 2005, I was a part of that original discussion when I was at the chamber. I went to Polytech to go see them in Dover. I didn't get a chance to go to Worcester, but I was a part of this, and I understood, and I know clearly what we're trying to do. But everything led us to Lake Taylor High School.
All the what?
All the planning, and after we went through the assessment, put us at Lake Taylor High School, and then in one meeting, all of a sudden it was Booker T.
Accurate.
No, that's not accurate.
The planning, everything on the CTE shows Lake Taylor High School, and then there is not one draw-up, not one schematic, not one anything about Booker T. Washington High School, other than an entire year of misnomer information out in the community about a school going to Booker T. Washington. So what we have here today is a motion that just simply says, as members of this board, that we're still open to continue the planning and that we want someone to bring us a plan, bring us a school, so that we can ask all those questions, size and everything else. This is not getting into that. And as far as the presentation that was given, that was to bring in historical context and to bring everyone up to date as to what those meetings were looking like as far as the information. Nobody was trying, we were trying to be transparent and be clear to everybody, this is what's happening. Now we have a motion that signals to the broader community that this board is still on target, it's still interested in the CTE high school, and that we very much like to see proposals come before us.
Right. So, okay, Ms. Smith, and then we're going to wrap it up then.
I support CTE. A reaffirmation is not necessary. The best way we can show the public that we are in support of a CTE is to begin work on it. And there's nothing precluding us from doing that.
And there's nothing
Okay.
said there hasn't been.
I'm just
Okay.
saying.
Okay.
This,
you.
this thing isn't necessary.
I have a
That's all I'm saying.
clarification.
Just for the record.
I'd like clarification I'd like to offer to Mr. Clanton.
Okay.
So
a
just
brief clarification, please.
if you can request from the partnership, minutes from a May 20th, 2018.
Partnership
meet-
or this board? Are you talking about the Greater
The
Norfolk?
collaboration that you have.
Or
The
this
city
board?
manager, city manager, the mayor, the vice mayor, the Greater North
I
Corporation,
just wanted
that
to make sure everyone
collaboration.
understood what you meant by collaboration.
Ask for copies of the minutes dealing with the, I think it was a May 2018 meeting. There was also a meeting that was being scheduled that you may have attended in July of 2018. That was why we were asking for an update in September of 2018 and never got an update. So there was work done around Booker T. There was a business brief that was put together. Ms. Goshen was a partner in putting together that brief. So get that information, I think it would help, and then the whole board will have the benefit
Was
of
there
it.
a vote from the board to go to Booker T? Because you were chairman at that time, right?
Okay, this is what we're going to do, guys.
Just
This
know.
is,
That's all.
okay.
Open and
Miss-
transparent
Miss
discussion
Martin,
about it,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Martin, we're going to conclude with your statement.
Just from
question.
listening to this conversation and also conversations I've had outside of the boardroom, we are just one stakeholder of many, and I understand that this discussion or voting or reaffirming the resolution is not necessary as a policy process or a common practice, but it's from the discussions we've had over the past year and several months that I've been on this board, and outside this boardroom, there's been a loss of confidence in the school's commitment. And so I do understand the necessary measures to reaffirm as a board that we are committed to moving forward with the independent CTE program that was originally proposed. And it is necessary for relationship building and to revive confidence in the process. That's all.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, I do thank you for your discussion. I take all of your comments very seriously so that we can add to this discussion and make sure that everybody has a good understanding of what is being proposed so that they can vote according to their preference. And, you know, again, each of us, we are 7 board members, we each have our own opinions of how things are being presented, of how things are being done, and I just want to remind us that those are opinions. Next item on the agenda, community engagement. Dr. Birdsong.
Dr. Gabriel, Mr. Clanton, members of the board. Dr. LeGrand, if you don't mind coming forward. As we start a brand-new school year, we're certainly wanting to engage our community members at a higher level. And the Department of Communications and Media Relations is responsible for processing our volunteers into the school system. And so we've asked Dr. LeGrand to provide us a brief update in that regard, and also to provide some information about our Peach Jar initiative. Dr. LeGrand.
Good evening.
For allowing me to have a few moments of your time.
It's my pleasure to talk about volunteering. Community engagement is something that's near and dear to my heart personally because I came from nonprofit. And so when the volunteer process came down to the communications office, we were very happy to take on the project and the process. Thank you. So, we're going to today go over a few topics, types of volunteers, online application, and then brief you on the background check process. So NPS, of course, depends very heavily on its partners and volunteers. As we know, there's opportunities all over the district to allow volunteers to come in, whether they're chaperoning for field trips, whether they are participating in other activities. And so we really want to have a robust volunteer program at NPS. And so we have a number of people that are interested, from parents and guardians, civic organizations, local businesses, and government agencies. So we very much appreciate the process we very much appreciate the folks that want to come in, but we certainly want to make sure the process is a safe and secure one. And so with that, we want to ensure that the volunteer application process is not only easy, but a seamless process to make sure that we have a robust background check. So in 2018-2019, the school division began its partnership with BIB, or otherwise known as Background Investigation Bureau, and PlayerSpace. So just a little bit about that. PlayerSpace is one organization. It's the interface that you see when you click on our volunteer page. When you click on that, it's a nice volunteer platform. And then BIB is the organization that actually does the background check screening. So PlayerSpace nor the division gets any social security numbers, any identifiable information. That information is a secure process and goes through BIB. And many other organizations use BIB. I believe that the Norfolk Education Foundation used to use BIB in partnership with their interface, their primary interface, when that was in existence as well. Schools are, of course, are most often the first point of contact for interested volunteers, and so we are working to make sure that we enhance the availability of information at various schools, from flyers to preparing our they used to be called something else, the engagement specialists. So our engagement specialists, they changed the name this year. So making sure our engagement specialists are fully informed about the volunteer process so they can drive folks to the platform to quickly apply for being a volunteer, whether you're being a coach, a mentor. Those are some sections we've pulled out. So if you're going to be a coach, if you want to be a tutor or a mentor, you can apply individually, and then you have a listing of all of the schools. If it's a specific school or two that you want to apply for, volunteers can apply for individual schools as well. A notification then goes to the principal as well as our department, and we then go through the application process, approval process. So BIB will initially get the application, they will do the background screen, and that's comprehensive, any kind of criminal history, any kind of traffic violations, things like that we might need to be aware of. And so sex offender registry, those things are all checked. And then they come back to our division, and we actually look at each individual application. Interested parties, of course, may visit the online portal, and so on our district webpage, they click on the portal, and they will then be directed through the very quick and easy application process. And so I mentioned the National Sex Offender Database is certainly checked, and then they get a little volunteer card. So this is a sample of the volunteer card. Doesn't have their face on it, but it certainly is very easily identifiable. They hang it on a lanyard, just like you all see us walking around with our lanyards and our ID. And we do have a special one we changed it up a little bit for those that are coaches, so that can be easily identifiable as well. And they get that card mailed to them, and usually it takes about 10 to 14 days from the time that they apply for them to receive the application, for them to receive their background check completed, approval, and then for them to get their ID card. In the interim, sometimes it is a case where applications come in very quickly, and say 3 days before a field trip, someone wants to apply, something that we have done in the past, we will usually get a notification that that person's background check is cleared. If it is someone that has cleared very quickly, we will then sometimes give approval via that email to the principal so that that person can still volunteer even if they don't have their card, because we want to make the process as easy as possible. And so we will communicate with the principal to say they don't have their volunteer card, but use this email in lieu of that until they get their actual card. So I kind of went over that. Upon submission, the applicant's information goes directly to BIB. Again, this information does not come to us. We can't stress enough that Social Security numbers, we don't get access to that. We want to make sure it's clear. However, if someone has a question, we might ask if they get locked out of the system or something like that, and we're helping to reset their application. We may ask for their date of birth. We do have access to that, the month and day, not the year. But we'll ask that information to make sure that we can reset their program and they can reapply. Sometimes we've run into issues, and we're still working through this process. It's still an evolution. We have had volunteers that don't have Social Security numbers if they're from another country or for whatever reason. And so we depend heavily on the principal, and usually they have a relationship with the school system or with that individual school already, and so we depend on that. We are working to try to fix that. So that's something that will continue to be something that we evaluate on how do we, address that when people don't have a Social Security number. Then after the application is completed, typically within 48 to 72 hours, again, the individual will have their notification that they have been approved. That's for the clear checks. Another piece that we are still kind of going through is and gathering information and working to complete the complete criteria for is those that have some significant criminal background checks, some things that have happened in their history. Certainly if something is dismissed, then they can still be approved, but because people are working directly with kids, we want to make sure the process is such that we're not, putting people in the schools that don't need to be there. And so we're talking to other educational foundations and groups that have this process with the city, and we'll be presenting some things with the attorney's office to make sure that we're covered if we do deny someone on that basis.
Okay.
And then all approved applicants, as I mentioned, receive a volunteer card. I'm sorry, I'm trying to move through this quickly because I know we're short on time. Are there any questions with regard to the background check process and what we're doing?
Got a couple quick.
Yes.
Do we have an idea of how many we processed last year?
Good question. Several hundred. We had quite a number of them, especially as, one thing I did forget to mention, that the ID card, once they do the application and they receive approval, their ID is valid for 2 years. So they do have to resubmit. The one nice thing about the system that we use is that it will prompt them to reapply if once they're soon to run out of their status. So yes, but we have a number of applicants that have gone through the application process, and we expect more because, of course, it's the beginning of the school year.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about in a meeting was that next year, maybe in the student handbook, adding a little piece about the volunteer program so that we can get folks, as parents are reading through the student handbook, to actually remember to go ahead and sign up so that we don't have the backlog with, 3 days before the field trip. So getting them to know that they can go ahead and apply to be an applicant. So that was something that.
Dr. Cooper, I did have one more thing.
Yes.
So I knew this was going to be on the section here,
Certainly.
so I was like, okay, because
Yes.
I'm familiar with BIB.
Certainly.
So it's a continuation.
Yes, absolutely.
But I went on, one of the things I wanted to note is, so on the application piece, we say download application is probably just to complete the application. Because
Right.
you're not really downloading anything. But then when I went to go click in my information, it automatically recognized me from going through the process and that I needed to renew. So it was
Right.
great to see all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then I got to the part that I just want to make sure we point out about, there's 2 documents that were completed for the district, the guidelines for school volunteers and then the code of ethics. And I didn't see where I had to say yes or no to it, but I didn't have a copy of it. and there was no way for me to download it as a new person to get it. So I just want to make sure that we're getting folks, and we get folks who may get stuck there, and I
And
don't
say
know.
that, those two areas
So there's the
again?
guidelines for volunteers,
Uh-huh.
which are, and then you have the code of ethics
Code of
for volunteers, two documents I've actually created. But I was just saying that they're not in there. If we
Okay,
could
and I'll
place-
check with that. We've been working on the back end with PlayerSpace. Actually, one of our web coordinators had, we made sure that he had approval to kind of go in the back end, because PlayerSpace, we found out, we didn't, I didn't necessarily select this program, but they are kind of a startup, and so they've had some challenges.
Yeah, and I'm
But
totally
no,
fine with it. I'm
we
just thinking
certainly
that
can make sure that
maybe
those things
a
are.
landing page for
Certainly.
volunteers, we could just add those two documents and people can
Absolutely.
get them from there.
Yeah,
So
and we're looking to do like an FAQ sheet as well, and, you know, a few disclaimers. So this is
Okay,
a continual
that's good.
process, as you know. So certainly I'll make sure that we look at adding those
That's all.
things.
Good feedback.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
all right.
All right. Thank you. Any other
well,
questions?
Let
Oh,
me
yes.
add one thing. If we can also send out to our civic leagues,
Yes.
how to apply so that they can put it on their Facebook page. And then I would say to Dr. Birdsong and Dr. LeGrand, how you feel about, Nextdoor is very popular also.
Yes.
And so I want to keep safety as our main priority. So if I know that a lot of civic league members, when I go, the presidents say we would like to include it in their newsletter. So if that's possible, how to apply for
Certainly.
Norfolk Public Schools, that would, because there are a
Yes.
lot of folks that don't have kids in the division that want to help.
Oh, absolutely. A
we
number
wanna-
of our
we wanna,
volunteers are retirees or people that have
and
grown
we do
kids
need
and they just like to come
So,
and volunteer.
okay.
We've been working with our school nutrition office as well, and we have some conversations because we need lunch monitors and folks to come and volunteer. And so that's something
Yeah.
that we've thought about, you know, asking for volunteers for specifically, you know, for lunch monitors and folks to work in our cafeteria.
Great.
So we can add that. That's been
Great.
a recent discussion in maybe the last 24 hours.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yes, you're
Okay,
welcome.
and then peach jar?
Yes, peach jar. So some of you may be familiar with peach jar. I know that some of our staff in the division are familiar because they live in different cities, and so they get peach jar flyers from their specific schools. So most of the school districts, I think Virginia Beach still doesn't have peach jar, but the other school districts in this area do have peach jar. And what it is pretty much is a flyer management system. So we try to save the trees a bit, although of course we're in a school district and we're going to still print some flyers and information. But this is a way for people to have very easy access. Everybody usually, I feel kind of naked up here without my phone. I'm reaching for them. I usually have both of them, but you know, you walk around with your cell phone and oftentimes you'll use that smartphone to keep up with things. So I'll talk a little bit about Peach Jar and Karen Tanner, who is, you know, 1 foot in communications and 1 foot in acting school board clerk. She has been very instrumental with helping to lead the charge. Even prior to my getting here, some of the conversation she had initially learned about Peach Jar, and so we evaluated this program and system, went to a number of conferences, and Peach Jar representatives were there, so we finally have been able to get Peach Jar, and it is no charge to the district. So that's something that's very nice, is that it's a system that's free to us. So with Peach Jar, it is an electronic flyer management system. Some things that are great about Peach Jar is that it will ensure information actually makes it home. Sometimes with the little ones, they stuff things in their book bags and they forget. And sometimes with the older ones, they just don't think it's important. So this is a way to ensure that the information actually gets home. People can access those flyers anywhere. You can discover new opportunities for your child, whether it's, you know, maybe a program, an extracurricular activity or program that they may want to be involved in, or maybe you want them to be involved in as a parent, and it's a nice way to have it kind of at your fingertips. All NPS locations and local community organizations can use the platform. So parent engagement and participation will certainly be improved. E-flyers do save time and money. So typically the process in the communications department has been, if an outside organization wants to submit a flyer, they want to submit it to 3 or 4 elementary schools near whatever program they want to hold. And the geographic location might be important, and so they want to distribute it to 3 schools. What they typically would have to do is get the school count from us, and we work with our information systems to get that information, and then they have to physically print those flyers out, fold them, package them, bring them to the district office, and then we send them through pony mail so that those individual flyers could go home. That certainly is a cost. And what will happen now is that they will upload. So there is a cost still associated, but it's a very nominal cost. We don't get that money. That money does go to Peach Jar. That's how they keep running the program. But there's something that's nice about Peach Jar is that we can identify a list of organizations and community partners that we will allow to distribute free flyers. So something like our post over at the city. They send a lot of information to us, and so we would certainly have them on that list. But other organizations that might charge for a baseball camp or something like that, they would pay a nominal fee, but it's usually cheaper than them having to print out, say 2,000 flyers and send those flyers in the pony mail and then hope that they get home to parents. So all community organizations will be able to utilize the platform. Peach Jar is FERPA compliant and doesn't collect or access any personally identifiable data, so that's another important safety feature. Of course, we're always having safety and security at the top of mind, and so that's very important. The format is also ADA compliant, so we have made sure, especially on our website and in other platforms, that we are making sure that we adhere to any kind of ADA compliant requirements, and so those are 2 things that are pretty important that I wanted to make sure people that are visually impaired, what have you, or other disabilities still will be able to access this. The Office of Communications and Media Relations has begun the rollout of Peach Jar this year. Karen Tanner has been very instrumental in assisting with that, as well as Dr. Cataldo has offered the ITRTs to assist, so kind of a train the trainer. So the ITRTs had a little sneak preview. I went to their staff training on August 13th and gave them a preview of Peach Jar. I also took some time to mention that at the to principals at the Administrators Day on August 21st, and the internal communications coordinator / acting board clerk emailed our principals on August 27th. We're trying to time this rollout such that it's not too overwhelming for people, because of course the beginning of school is very busy, but this is something that is going to be very useful to the district, so we want to make sure they start to utilize it and understand the benefits of it early on, but we didn't want to inundate people too much. So we're going to be continuing to train those ITRTs so that they are familiar with being able to help the family engagement specialists and others in the district that might be training on Peach Jar. Communications and Media Relations will approve all flyers, so ultimately the approval still rests in the communications department. So while principals, if someone comes in off the street and Mary Smith wants to have a flyer sent through the school to the community about her soccer camp, she can bring that flyer in. Most of the time, the person at the front desk or the family engagement specialist, whomever they are talking to at the school, will then direct them to upload that flyer through Peach Jar. So the school will see that the flyer is actually uploaded for their school, but the actual approval process still rests in the communications department. And so somebody that's on the PR and communications side, whether it's the Senior Director of Communications, myself, the Internal Communications Coordinator, or the Marketing and Media Relations Coordinator, we will be able to approve those flyers. And the reason why we want to make sure that approvals process is kind of close in this office and not too many people have that. Sometimes people might not know that, there's a spelling error or something like that on the flyer, but also sometimes there are events and activities that we can't necessarily sanction. For instance, if Budweiser was having a back-to-school program, great that they're having that, but we can't approve that, you know? And so we have to be mindful. Even one of our community partners gave a nice, a flyer to us, but it looked like there were alcoholic beverages on the picture, and so I would contact them and ask them to change the picture up or something like that. And so, that's why we want to make sure we review the flyer. A nice thing is, many of our community organizations don't have, graphic designers, and this system will allow you to use some templates already. And so we can also design some NPS templates, and our internal folks can use them, but then people can go on and kind of create a nice, neat ADA compliant flyer. Should the flyer be denied, as I mentioned, a message indicating the reason for denial will be sent to the submitter, and the submitter will have an opportunity to resubmit the flyer. And lastly, it's just a great way, I'm very excited about our rollout of Peach Jar. It's a great way to continue our community engagement. I know that that's very important. Dr. Gabriel mentioned something about making sure that we communicate with our civic leagues, and I mentioned that we had recently gotten that list from the city, and so I think it's going to be really a great rollout for our division, and really a great way for our community engagement to continue to improve.
And if I could, thank you, Kalila, just add to it as well. There's some folks who are grandfathered in who do not have to pay, which is
Right,
City of
that's what I
Norfolk
was
agencies,
mentioning.
Norfolk
Yes,
Public Library,
absolutely.
Norfolk Council PTAs. This is a great new way for them to engage parents as well. And then also Parks and Rec. And a Blackboard Connect message will be going out the latter part of this month. We wanted to make sure that the SDSs in the schools had an opportunity to upload all the correct information, because we don't want, a parent saying, I didn't get a phone call, I didn't get a flyer, we don't know what's happening. So the latter part of this month, we'll just do a nice robocall and a reminder and a push on social media and our NPS website that Peach Jar is there. And then also it's great for principals. They can start communicating with parents with the different flyers that are there. So this is a great engagement, not only just for the community, but for the principals to communicate to their parents as well.
Gabriel, I just wanted to get clarity on, are individuals to register and go to a site?
Yes, so they'll register.
Okay.
So there's a Peach Jar page on our website that'll kind of guide them through, and then they'll register for that. So one thing is nice is that when you register, you can upload your information. So sometimes, unfortunately, people will put their correct information in that platform, but they might not have necessarily updated it with the school. We try to remind them to update it with their school. But if you register, then you'll have an account. And so, for instance, if I have a high schooler, I don't have any kids, but if I had a high schooler and I had an elementary student, I could register for only receiving those flyers from, if my student is at Granby and Larchmont, or, Larry Moore and Maury, I could just get those flyers and the district-wide flyers, but I don't have to get bombarded with every single flyer. And so it really makes me home in on, which flyers are most important to me and my child.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bertram. So, right now, I'm going to ask the board that we modify our agenda. I really do appreciate all of the good discussion that we've had thus far. I knew that we probably were going to need to spend more time on the academic pieces and some of the other items, which I'm glad that we did. What I would like to ask of the board is that we modify the agenda so that we give ourselves 30 minutes for our closed session discussion, and that we table the matters of the board, including the norms discussion, and the other items associated with that topic for another time. And what I will do is Dr. Birdsong, myself, and Mr. Clinton will look at our agenda to see where we can put that in, and we will follow up with you all. I want to be respectful of all of your time and certainly the individuals that are here with administration. So if you all are okay with that, then we have to vote to modify the agenda, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just going to, Madam Chair, if I may, I move to amend the agenda to remove items under 7, matters of the board, and that we extend our adjournment from 30 minutes from now on, if that clock's right. So what is that, till 7:10? Is that cool with everybody? Okay. And that we postpone the matters of the board to a later date.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
One
Discussion.
question, on the closed session item, item A, dealing with the board's performance evaluation of the superintendent. Is that accurate?
Where?
No, that's not. I think somehow that got it put on the agenda. There's actually two, I noticed that myself. There's two things on the agenda about,
Mr.
that's
Jordan,
an old one.
is that in the actual, like, embedded in the
The one for
board docs?
September 11th
It's-
is
yeah.
correct. That is
Somehow-
from some
yeah.
previous.
We're noticing that board docs is, it's like attaching, if you say certain things, it's duplicating it in there. It's like a copy paste if you say we're gonna have closed session.
My copy from board docs of the agenda has the correct, but it also, I saw that as being in there too. But that is from an earlier board meeting.
All right, so then can you just clarify for me, are we just dealing with the one item in closed session?
No, we are dealing
No,
with two
there's-
items.
this
in
is the
closed session,
motion.
But
So we'll read it once we get to that. We have another motion on the floor.
Well, the reason I'm asking, you were asking for the extension of the 30 minutes. I was just trying to get an
Yeah,
understanding.
we're gonna handle
what we're
we
doing,
can-
that's
I
all.
mean, we can take the whole 30 minutes, or we could take 5 minutes. I'm just saying, if we
Trying to
can
get an
extend
understanding
it.
of what we're doing.
Right, if we could just give ourselves up until, 7:10, that would be great. We hopefully will not need all of that time. All right. Okay, Ms. Tanner?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, I move that we enter into closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
By
Oh,
the
we
way,
can read the resolution.
But before you read the motion, can you just tell me what the,
He's gonna read it. He's gonna
no, I
read it.
know, but
That
can you
would-
just tell me legal matters and is it something else?
Yeah, there's a provision for both personnel matter and student matter.
Okay.
And then to the extent it's a legal matter, it's really just tied in
Okay.
to those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Ready?
Okay, if you could read the resolution.
Move that members of the school board go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of Section 2.2-377 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for A, discussion or consideration of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of Norfolk Public Schools pursuant to subsection 1 of the above cited code section. The subject of this portion of the session concerns a specific person providing services to students within Norfolk Public Schools. B, discussion or consideration of disciplinary and other matters concerning students in Norfolk Public Schools that would involve the disclosure of information contained in a scholastic record pursuant to subsection 2 of the above cited code section. The subject of this portion of the session is consideration of the funding and awarding of scholarships to specific students. And C, consultation with legal counsel pertaining to specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel pursuant to subsection 8 of the above cited code section. The subjects of this section of the motion are consultation with legal counsel concerning legal matters related to the personnel and student support matters identified above. Basine? Aye. Hampson? Clanton?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye. Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll meet in the small room.